All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday night to you. I hope you are doing well. We have many stories to go through. Den is here tonight. He's helping moderate all the comments on YouTube. So if you have any thing you want to say, be nice, share that, and Den will lock out anyone who's being evil. You could support the channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And you can also subscribe to my channel right here by going to friendlyatheist.com. Leave your questions in the comments and we'll get to them in between stories. We have many things to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and get started with Ryan Walters because I feel like I can't stop talking about this guy, but he also can't stop pushing Christianity on everybody else. So last time we talked about this dude, it's because he wanted to spend $3 million in taxpayer money to purchase like 55,000 Trump Bibles for classrooms all across Oklahoma. Ryan Walters, of course, is Oklahoma's superintendent of public instruction. He's like the big education leader across the state. And I wanted to tell you about what he's now trying to do. And there's a few different things he's done in the wake of the election, okay? So the first thing is, let me tell you really quickly about his plan to use taxpayer dollars to purchase the Bibles, because there's a big update on that story, okay? And I know I've gone through this before, but I feel like new people are learning about this guy all the time. And it is possible, hasn't been announced yet, that Donald Trump chooses this guy to be the Secretary of Education. And if that's the case, you're definitely going to want to know what this guy is up to, okay? So the first thing to tell you is that over the summer, he issued a memo demanding that every teacher in the state of Oklahoma in public schools incorporate the Bible into their curriculum. Why? Because he wanted to teach kids about the history of the country. And he said adherence to the mandate is compulsory, immediate and strict compliance is expected. And then he issued like a very specific memo later on. He said school districts had to provide physical copies of the Bible and the 10 Commandments to every teacher. And he actually said in that memo, here's how teachers need to incorporate the Bible into their classes. Like if you're in history class, this is where you need to use it. If you're in English class, this is how you must teach metaphors and things like that. Don't use another book, use the Bible to do it. Things like that. It is ridiculous. He also said that if teachers don't comply, they could be fired. He said, and I quote, if teachers don't want to teach it, they are compelled to teach it, or they can find another job. And then later on in the summer, he announced that he would set aside $3 million from his own office's budget to buy Bibles for the classroom so all these teachers could use them. And then he also asked the state legislature for another $3 million for the same thing for reasons no one knows about, but they have not said yes to that. But basically, he wants to take money from like staff salaries and use it to purchase 55,000 Bibles, even though there are not 55,000 teachers teaching the things he said you need the Bible for. And even though the Bible is free if you know how the interwebs work, no, he's like, no, we need to buy a physical copy. And then he put out a memo specifically saying this. He said, in this, I should back up for a second. He said, hey, I have a pool of $3 million and I'm opening the door to who wants to supply Oklahoma teachers with 55,000 Bibles. And this is what he said there. We need 55,000 Bibles. And you have 2 weeks to get it to us. You have to provide the KJV version of the Bible, the KJV Bible, for historical accuracy. All right, whatever. He said the Bible has to include the pledge, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, just like Jesus wanted, which is a weird thing to have in the Bible already. And he said, I'll remove myself here. No study guides, no narration, commentary, none of those, teen Bibles or anything weird like that. And then the really weird one, you have to have the book leather bound or inside leather-like material for durability. And the thing is, when we discussed this before, everyone read that and said, there are no Bibles that are like that for cheap. I mean, there were news reporters that asked around and to book publishers, and they said, do you guys publish anything like this? And one Christian bookseller says, we sell 2,900 kinds of Bibles. None of them fit these parameters. So Ryan Walters was going after a very specific Bible. And of course, there is one Bible that meets all those requirements, and it's the one Donald Trump was selling. That one has all those American documents, and it has the lyrics to God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood. So it was clear Ryan Walters wanted to spend $3 million to buy Trump Bibles, which cost $60 plus shipping. Why? I don't know. Which Trump gets a cut of. I mean, that's why. And this was all before the election. It was just obvious what he was doing, and it was extremely shady. And there's no way anyone else could even bid on this, because the only way you would have those books ready to, in order to deliver all those books within 2 weeks, you would have to have those Bibles already printed out and sitting in a warehouse, so that all you have to do is box them up and put a shipping label on them. So everyone knew what Ryan Walters was up to. He was trying to curry favor with Donald Trump, make an in-kind contribution to either the Trump campaign or just Donald Trump's pockets. And that's why he was doing all this. It's not about the kids. It's never about the kids in Oklahoma. Are you kidding me? So after he got a lot of backlash for that, he said, you guys, that's totally not what I'm doing. And he issued a revised proposal so that people could bid on supplying the books. And this is his revised version of what he sent. And take a look at this at the very top here. He says, okay, you still have to provide the pledge, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, but they don't have to be part of the book. You can do it separately. Okay, so anyone who already has Bibles in hand, they're good to go. They just got to, print out the rest of this stuff, staple it together, and put it in the box. But then look at what he says at the bottom. 2.7. The supplier's Bible must still be leather or leather-like material for durability. And by the way, those additional documents also have to be bound in durable material. So basically, you need to provide like 4 pages of material in tiny font, like the Constitution, the Pledge of Allegiance, Bill of Rights, all that stuff. You still have to put that in as a brand new book. You can't just print it out and staple it. So basically, he changed the criteria, but really the Trump Bible was still the only one that met the criteria. So he didn't change anything. It was ridiculous. So why do you even make that change? Because it looks like you're opening the door to non-Trump Bibles, but then you're immediately shutting the door on that possibility. The funny thing is, a spokesperson for his office told reporters these changes were made to provide much better value to Oklahomans. No, I could provide much better value to Oklahomans, because I would just say, if you need to refer to the Bible, you go on the internet and you go click, 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 and you find the Bible. It's free. You already have the internet. There's your value. Just pay me whatever you would have paid Donald Trump, right? So all of that happened a while ago. And then there was a lawsuit. This is the front page of the lawsuit. A whole bunch of plaintiffs up here, parents, ministers, kids who are in school in Oklahoma, sued Ryan Walters and pretty much everyone connected with this whole charade. And they said, look, you can't have a Bible mandate forcing teachers to use this. You can't spend this money, taxpayer dollars, on these Bibles. And they also said, hey, judge, we need you to issue a ruling on this quickly before he shuts down his proposal. Like he says, deadline's over. I'm giving the award to you, Trump, and you can start mailing out your Bibles that are sitting in a warehouse because no one else wants them. The lawsuit said that his Bible mandate interferes with the parents' ability to direct the religious and moral upbringing of their children. They said the Bible mandate was coercive, right? And you can't do that. You're forcing kids to adopt Christianity by shoving this in their faces. And a lot of these parents suing did not want that. More specifically, the lawsuit said Ryan Walters violated the Oklahoma Administrative Procedures Act. Basically, if you want to issue a new rule, a new mandate, there's a period where you say, this is the new rule I want to issue, and people, the public, can comment on it before it goes into effect. Walters didn't do any of that because he thinks he's a dictator. And the lawsuit said Oklahoma's constitution prohibits state funding for the promotion of religion, and that's all this was. So that lawsuit was filed. So, with that in mind, what is the update that has now happened? Well, in the past couple of weeks, since Trump got elected, Ryan Walters has been on a tear trying to get on Trump's good side before Trump announces who's going to be Secretary of Education. Okay, so for example, one of the things he did, this is November 7th, he said, regarding the elimination of the U.S. Department of Education, because Ryan Walters, like all these conservative freaks who hate public education, wants to just eliminate the Department of Education. And he said, the federal government has hijacked our education system, using taxpayer dollars to impose harmful policies and control what is taught in our schools. Unlike Ryan Walters, who literally wants to do exactly that. He says, this memo addresses 5 areas where eliminating the Department of Education and moving to block grants would restore authority to states, allowing communities and not Washington bureaucrats to decide what's best for their children. So that's one of the things he did, basically saying, hey, Donald, you know how you're looking for a Secretary of Education who will dismantle the government? I'm your guy because I agree we need to get rid of the Department of Education. Put me in charge and I will destroy it, because he would anyway. He can't do his job well. So that's one thing he did since Trump got elected. Another thing he did, check this out. This is November 11th. He formed a Trump Education Advisory Committee. And basically what this is saying, well, eventually when you choose an education secretary, they're going to have new demands for all these public schools. So in Oklahoma, we're forming a little committee to streamline any of your changes because, Donald, I love you, and we're ready to go as soon as you tell us how high to jump. So that's the next thing Ryan Walters did. He formed a Trump suck-up committee to make sure in Oklahoma, they will destroy public schools as exactly the way Donald Trump's administration wants them to. Third thing he did. This is November 12th. He's got nothing better to do. He announces Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism. Look at this press release. He announced the establishment of the Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism at the State Department of Education, which will serve to promote religious liberty and patriotism in Oklahoma and protect parents, teachers, and students' ability to practice their religion freely in all aspects. We're just forming a little club in this office to promote religious liberty and patriotism, because you know what's hard for Christians in Oklahoma? Being Christian. It's so hard. We got to make sure it's super easy. So we're just going to form this group. And also the subtext is, hey, Donald Trump, did you see all the stuff I did? You like this, right? Pick me, pick me. So all of that stuff is what he's been up to this week. What does this have to do with the Bible thing? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Because regarding buying the Bibles, Walters decided to just cancel that whole proposal. People had 3 weeks to turn in their bids to purchase all those Bibles. And basically a book company could say, I think I could supply you all 55,000 Bibles, but I can do it for $2.5 million. And I'm the lowest bid. So give me your money. And Ryan Walters could have said yes. Well, this week he informed everybody that bid on it that their bids are no good, that they were just canceling the whole thing altogether, which is weird because you would think, given everything I just told you, he absolutely wants to hand money over to Trump and buy these Trump Bibles for these public schools. So a website called Oklahoma Watch reported on this first. And check out what they said. Bidders were notified Thursday. This is last Thursday. The state solicitation had been canceled. Dan Issett, a spokesman for the education department, did not explain why. Issett said he was too busy for a call with Oklahoma Watch. Doing what? You think Ryan Walters' staff is busy with stuff? No. And then in an email, he said the agency will issue a new request for proposals to ensure taxpayer money is utilized efficiently and the best possible resources are made available to our students. So they canceled the bidding, but they're totally going to do it again in a couple weeks, is what he's saying, which is weird because that doesn't explain what went wrong with the bidding process they just had. Now, Oklahoma Watch said they put in like public record requests to figure out what's happening with the Bible purchases, and Walters's office, quote, failed to turn up any records. So it's just a whole office full of absolute shadiness, right? But I think I know why he canceled the bidding process. And the Oklahoma Watch hints at it, but they don't take the final step and say, you guys, this is why he canceled it. But I'm pretty sure I know why he canceled it. Because I think in Ryan Walters' head, the only people who are going to bid on this were the people who have all the Trump Bibles, because that's the only book that meets all the criteria. It's why Ryan Walters tailored the criteria so that only one company could meet the demand, right? We all just saw that. What happened, and according to Oklahoma Watch, it seems like this is what happened. Someone else bid on the proposal. They offered to sell Oklahoma, to make, create, ship all the books Oklahoma wanted, and that guy's name is not Donald Trump. And I think that's where it went wrong. Check this out. Again, this is from Oklahoma Watch, which first reported on this. One bidder, Mark Herkimer, said the state owes bidders an explanation for the abrupt cancellation. Herkimer is the managing director of the Herkimer Foundation in Willis, Texas, which spent time and money, including purchasing a $500 insurance policy to meet the bidding requirements. I would be disappointed if this was a stunt, Herkimer said. Dude, it was a stunt. What's wrong with you? He said he supports the idea of using Bibles in school as a literary reference. So this guy is, as far as I know, a MAGA dude. And he decided to bid because he actually wants to provide Bibles to these schools. His bid, which he asked to keep confidential to protect the competitive process, significantly undercut the $3 million allocation. So this guy offered to provide all the books, all 55,000 Bibles to Oklahoma schools for way less than $3 million. And I'm pretty sure Ryan Walters saw that bid and said, oh shit, if you're the best bidder for the lowest cost, I can't just give Donald Trump the money. I can't just buy the Trump Bibles because you're cheaper. And then I would have to try to explain that to people after he's already said, you guys, it's totally not about buying the Trump Bible. So that's what appears to have happened. Now, look, the one thing at the bottom here, Herkimer said the 2-week turnaround time, the delivery time, he couldn't do that. He couldn't create these books and ship them out to schools in 2 weeks. It was unnecessarily restrictive and served to limit competition. And in his bid, he asked that it be extended to 12 weeks. So this guy says, I can save you a ton of money, but you got to give me like 3 months to give you all these books, but I'll save you a ton of money in the process. And if you're doing a competitive bid, that's fine. That's how competitive bids work. You say, I'll do everything you want for the cheapest amount you want, and here's the compromise I need from you. And then people get those bids and they say, is this compromise worth it? And in this case, there's no like huge rush to get these Bibles to kids. I promise they're fine on their own. So that's the sort of bid you would say yes to if this mattered to you. But anyway, that request doesn't seem unreasonable by Ryan Walters' own standards. Like, we'll give you what you want for cheaper. We need a little more time to make it happen. So Walters could have accepted that bid, but instead they said no to that guy. And on the state education department's website, this is what it now says for that bid solicitation. You could see there is the like documentation for anyone who wants to submit a bid, and look to the left. What's the status? Canceled. He's Brian Walters clicked a switch and said, "Yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna do it again. We'll do it soon, but we need to tailor the request again to make sure Herkimer's Bibles do not count and the Trump Bibles still count." I don't know how you get more clearly shady than what this guy is doing right now, Walters. Instead, though, this week, Ryan Walters did not address the reason he was doing any of this. But check this out. This is what he said to a reporter. "Look, I believe if you're teaching American history, the Bible absolutely has to be included. We cannot allow left-wing activists to sit here and say we don't like Christianity," which is weird because I'm a left-wing activist and I don't remember directly saying we don't like Christianity. My issue is, okay, it doesn't belong in the public schools, and whether I like it or not is a separate issue. But like Kamala Harris wasn't saying that. Who are you talking about? And then he says later, are you going to if you become education secretary, are you going to mandate the Bible in schools nationwide? He said, you have to have it in the classrooms. We will ensure that history is taught in every class. With the Bible? What? That means kids will know American exceptionalism, which is weird because if you know anything about history, US history, global history, then you understand why Americans are so not exceptional. Like, we're all horrible people, historically speaking. And then he goes on, that means kids will know the role that faith played. We will be unapologetic about that here in Oklahoma. We want to make sure that every student knows the role that the Bible played in American history, which is easy because you can just chuck out the Bible because it didn't play a role. That's why the Constitution does not mention Jesus more than 0 times. So this is what Ryan Walters has been up to. And just to summarize this whole part of the story, because there is a part 2 coming up, Ryan Walters, who could be tapped to run the Department of Education, wants to eliminate the Department of Education because he wants to ensure that communities, not Washington bureaucrats, get to decide what's best for children, even though he really wants to become a Washington bureaucrat so that he can personally force classrooms around the country to use the Bible when teaching fake Christian history because he believes that's what's best for children. Absolutely ridiculous. I wish reporters cared about right-wing hypocrisy because there's never been a better subject. And you could also argue, if you want to get really conspiratorial about this, maybe Ryan Walters canceled his bid for proposals, his bid to provide all those books. Maybe he canceled that because he already knows he has another job awaiting him. And so why do this in Oklahoma and bring on all this negative press if you can just do it at the national level in a couple of weeks? That's the conspiracy side of me thinking. The other side of me is just saying he did all of this to get on Donald Trump's good side, but now that the election is over, he has other ways of getting on Trump's good side, so why keep this one going? This one's causing you a lot of bad press. Get rid of it. Do other stuff like he's been doing this week. Now, what about the lawsuit? Well, I asked one of the lawyers involved in the lawsuit what happened since this whole bid proposal has been canceled. And what the lawyer told me is that because Ryan Walters says he's still going to issue a brand new request for proposal to purchase the Bibles soon, nothing has changed. The lawyer said litigation plans remain unchanged. There's no reason to drop the lawsuit while the Bible mandate and the 55,000 Bible purchasing is still on the table. So that's where we're at with Ryan Walters for the Bible buying aspect. There is a part 2 to this. I will get to that in a moment. But for now, let me stop there and I will take questions on this. And then I'll get to the other reasons we're talking about this horrible, horrible dude. Oklahoma, what the hell? What are you doing to the rest of us? Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. Love that last name. Look at that. Showerman. Frick yeah time. Assigned reading makes the book 100%, 100 times less fun, or maybe I'm just a contrarian. I know kids love reading big books. They especially love reading KJV language Bibles. And like, what are you going to do with it? If you send a Bible to each class, every student doesn't have it. What are you going to do? Reading it out loud? It doesn't make any sense. It's just a dumb idea. I hope someone does an accounting to calculate how much of all this nonsense costs taxpayers, sans the Bible that never got purchased. I mean, if you think about how much money Ryan Walters has at his disposal to manage his own staff, to put together these committees that do absolutely nothing but like pleasure Trump, like, yeah, it's a lot of wasted money. He's also in charge of overseeing a lot of money that the legislature has allocated for school safety and asthma medication. And they are mad at him because he was just sitting on this money for a long time. So he's not even good at what he does with the money he's been given that's supposed to be used for other stuff. The idea that he could have control of the purse strings that deal with special ed and free and reduced lunches and all of that stuff it would be a disaster for a lot of Republican families too. And I hate that they have to find this out the hard way, because if it's not Ryan Walters, it's going to be some other right-wing idiot like Chris Rufo, who's just a right-wing propagandist who thinks everything is DEI because he saw a black person once. So the Department of Education is going to be like appointing Matt Gaetz Attorney General or RFK to Health and Human Services. They're going to find the most idiotic, incompetent person. And the question that we should be asking is, which of those is it? Because incompetent, like Ryan Walters, might actually be better than just pure maliciousness, like a Rufo who actually knows what he's doing. I heard the argument from some liberals, like, you know what, Matt Gaetz is probably the best option for Attorney General because he's too stupid to know what to do with power. RFK Jr., a little scarier, because he actually would be able to inflict a lot of damage upon people. Ryan Walters would make a lot of noise, but he's not smart enough necessarily to do a lot of damage. Maybe. Anyway, yeah, at some point, if Oklahoma's willing to open the books, it would be very interesting to see how much money. By the way, he's also wasted money when it comes to traveling to right-wing crazy conferences. And they were on him to get an accounting of how much money he's spending on his travel budget. This is an extremely funny outcome for a bald-faced attempt to donate taxpayer dollars directly to Trump. It might be. It might be funny in like a gallows humor sort of way. Like, because he's not done yet. He still wants to give money to Trump, taxpayer dollars to Donald Trump. He's just, this method didn't work out as intended, so he has to try plan C now. Check out the prayer video I don't know RW made and said Oklahoma students. We'll get to that in the next story. That's part 2. We're going to get to that video in a second. Ryan Walters, I got you. Jesus Saves Now. You can too at the Bible Factory outlet. I mean, what are they going to do with those Bibles after they purchase them? Like, textbooks are worth less year after year. And at some point, schools have to purchase new ones. Like these Bibles, and if they're made by Trump and they have Trump's stamp of approval on it anyway, you know it's not good quality. If you've seen videos of people reading the Trump Bible, the pages are quite literally sticky and they tear apart when you read them because of the way they're printed. So these books are not going to last very long to begin with. It's ridiculous. All right. Give me a second and we'll get to the next story involving Walters, which is also horrible. All right. Let me pull this up to make sure I have it. Yes. Okay. So here's part 2 of the Ryan Walters saga this week, because all the stuff I just told you in the previous video is not everything he's done. He also decided to go ahead and just purchase a whole bunch of Bibles anyway. And which Bibles do you think he bought? You'll never believe it. He went ahead, used his office budget, we think, and bought 500 Trump Bibles. And he announced this in a video on Twitter, I think. There you go. The Bible is back in Oklahoma's classrooms. By the way, there's an apostrophe missing, you superintendent of public instruction. We're getting our kids back on track. Let me play you this video that Ryan Walters said about the Bibles.
I'm excited to announce today that Oklahoma is the first state to bring the Bible back to the classroom. Today, we purchased over 500 Bibles that will be in the AP government classrooms across the state. Bible just like this. We have the Bible, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. These are foundational documents in our nation's history. Our kids have to understand the role the Bible played in influencing American history. It's very clear that the radical left has driven the Bible out of the classroom, which leads to a lack of understanding of American history. We will not stop until we've brought the Bible back to every classroom in the state.
So this is what happens when you are more interested in sucking up to Donald Trump in order to become his next education secretary than doing anything to actually help Oklahoma students. It also gives away something. Like I spent the last story saying, Ryan Walters' office spent all this time trying to create a criteria list. We need 55,000 KJV Bibles. And they go out of their way to say it has to be leather bound or leather-like bound. And they never say we want the Trump Bibles. And then all the reporters and all the critics are like, dude, we know you are only talking about the Trump Bibles because there are no other Bibles that meet the criteria that you have set. And what did he hold up in that video? He said he bought 500 copies. He was holding up the Trump-endorsed Bible. Like, yeah, buddy, we know. That's what everyone was saying and that you were lying about because you're a Christian in the sort of conservative Christian who thinks you can lie for Jesus and it's always okay. So here's Walters just holding up the Trump Bible, pretending this is not what he always had in mind. He just happened to pick up a Bible, this one. He doesn't even have to say Trump's name for people to know that's the book he's promoting. So couple of questions from that video. First, he said, we purchased these books. Who's we? Who purchased those books? Is it his office, which means he used taxpayer dollars to buy 500 Trump Bibles? Was it a donation? Because what the hell? I didn't know you could. I'm sure the Satanic Temple has a lot of books. They would love to donate to public schools everywhere. By the way, Trump Bibles cost $59.99 plus shipping, which means if Walter's office bought those, that's at least $30,000. Is it coming from his staff's budget? Like he doesn't say. And I have not seen any explanation of that. So that's messed up. But here's the other part, and I did not see this covered in a lot of the news stories about what I just shared with you. He said he bought 500 copies of that Trump Bible because he was going to send it to teachers who teach AP government. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Because if he sent those books to AP Gov teachers, first, it's not like they would have to use them. There is no requirement that teachers have to use the Bible in the classroom, despite Walter's mandate. Remember, superintendents have already rejected that mandate that Ryan Walters made up. And there's an ongoing lawsuit to make sure that mandate is not in effect. So that's one thing. All of this is for show. Walters isn't fixing anything that's broken. What he just made, what I just showed you, was a campaign video for himself. Ryan Walters made that video as like a pitch for Donald Trump so that he chooses him for Secretary of Education. That's my theory. But okay, let's talk about AP Gov. For those of you who are not familiar with the Advanced Placement Program, it is ridiculous that anyone could say, I got you a Bible for you to use in your AP Gov classroom. Because, okay, let's talk about AP classes if you're not aware of this. The College Board, the same company that I think does the ACT or SAT, one of those, they put together advanced placement classes. And in the United States and some other places, you can take AP classes, and at the end of the school year, you could take one test and get a score on it. And that score, if you do good, it might count for college credit. So I will tell you from personal experience, I took a bunch of AP classes in high school. I was able to finish college early because I had all those credits, and it saves a lot of tuition money because of that. So that's nice. Even if you don't take the test, even if your goal is not to get college credit, AP classes let students experience the rigor of a college classroom in high school. So maybe you find that useful and you want to know, what is a hard class actually like? So that's nice. But here's the thing about AP classes. There is so much material. Ask any AP teacher. There's so much material you got to get through. It feels like you are drinking from a fire hose, and your students feel like they're drinking from a fire hose if they're taking these classes, because you got to cover so much. The tests occur like a month or two before the school year even ends, so you don't even have the full school year. And there's so much, like, if you are teaching an AP class, they're also pretty standardized. Everyone around the country is basically teaching the same stuff around the same time in order to get through the material, because there is a set. You got to teach kids this and this and this. And you get some leeway in how you teach it. That's the fun of being a teacher. But in terms of material, you don't write what you're going to teach kids. So when it comes to AP government, you don't get to say, we're going to have a chapter when it comes to how the Bible was used by the founding fathers. That's not how it works. The AP curriculum is already set. You can download it. I was just showing this PDF. That's like 200 pages that goes through what you have to teach kids. And if you're lucky, maybe someone at the school you teach at can share with you, this is what I taught on any given day. This is the homework I assigned on any given day. The thing is, there is no time to work in additional material. Definitely not a lot of time. So let's say Ryan Walters gives these AP Gov teachers a Bible. What do you think they're going to do with it? You think they're going to say, well, this will change everything. Now I can teach kids about Christianity or something. No, they have a job to do. They've spent all year putting together a very meticulous curriculum because they have a job to do. They want their kids to get good scores. They're not going to change it because some idiot shoves a Bible in their face. That doesn't make any sense. And if Ryan Walters knew anything about AP classes, he would know that. This is interesting. If you read any article about what Ryan Walters just did with this 500 Bible purchase thing, not a single one of them that I have seen includes a statement from any AP government teacher who says, yes, this is good. I need this Bible. Because they wouldn't. You're teaching the best and the brightest at your school. You're not going to waste their time with bullshit. And that's what Ryan Walters wants them to do. Okay? Doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of time for these teachers specifically. So Walters either doesn't know or doesn't care how AP classes work. His only goal is to put out a video that has his face and Trump's product and the idea of education all wrapped up in one. Because again, this is a campaign video for him, not something for students. Students are an afterthought. They don't factor into this equation at all. By the way, in that video, I don't know if you noticed this. You can rewind the video if you need to. There was a coffee mug on his desk. You know what that coffee mug said on it? It said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Which is a ridiculous thing to be parroted by a state education leader who seems to think everything, including children, are just part of some larger battle with theological implications that you are waging against what? Against the secular world that just wants your kids to be smart? Oklahoma is ranked 49th out of 50 in education, according to like US News and World Report. They could use AP classes. If your kids are taking AP classes in Oklahoma, you should give them a hug and give them money or something, because they're the ones who are making your state look really good. And here's Ryan Walters saying, you know what we should do? Let's mess with those kids and their teachers. Let's just push them out of Oklahoma. Why? Who needs teachers anymore? And again, this is the guy who could very well become the next Secretary of Education. I'm waiting for that announcement to come at any second now. But that's part one. Here's the other part of this same video, because Ryan Walters also this week sent out a video to every public school superintendent in the state of Oklahoma. And he did a couple things. I'm going to show you the video in a second. First, he praised Donald Trump, and second, he recited a Christian prayer. And he basically demanded that every school district play the video for kids and then pass it along to their parents. Okay, I'm going to play you this video that he wanted every school to play for everybody.
We are excited to announce a new office here in the Oklahoma State Department of Education. That will be the Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism. For too long in this country, we've seen the radical left attack individuals' religious liberty in our schools. We will not tolerate that in Oklahoma. Your religious liberties will be protected. We've also seen patriotism mocked and a hatred for this country pushed by woke teachers' unions. We will not tolerate that in any school in Oklahoma. We want our students to be patriotic. We want our students to love this country. And we want all students' religious liberty to be protected. I will now say a prayer. And to be clear, students, you don't have to join. But if you so wish, I'm going to go ahead and pray. Dear God, thank you for all the blessings you've given our country. I pray for our leaders to make the right decisions. I pray in particular for President Donald Trump and his team as they continue to bring about change to the country. I pray for our parents, teachers, and kids that they get the best education possible and live high-quality lives. I also pray that we continue to teach love of country to our young people and that our students understand what makes America great and that they continue to love this country. Amen.
Why? Why are we trying to play that for everybody? Now, here's some good news. When local news reporters reached out to various superintendents, all of them are like, yeah, we are not doing this. Look at this. News on 6 and News 9 have reached out to districts across the state, with several saying they're electing not to show the video. Lots of school districts. I think there's a fine line over what is our responsibility as a school and what's the family's responsibility. Everyone has the right to choose where they go to school and has the right to choose where they go to church. But for us to think that it's our job to impose our will on students' religious freedoms, it's not going to happen here. Ridiculous. And look at what the Oklahoma Attorney General said. I want to repeat, Oklahoma's Attorney General, you would think, red state, guy's a Republican, but for some reason, Oklahoma's Attorney General is also supportive of church-state separation. He's not the worst. Here's what he said. There is no statutory authority for the state school's superintendent, Ryan Walters, to require all students to watch a specific video. Not only is this edict unenforceable, it is contrary to parents' rights, local control, and individual free exercise rights. So even the Attorney General's like, don't listen to Ryan Walters. He's an idiot, which is wonderful to see at least a little bit. I mean, but this is what Ryan Walters is what happens when you allow spineless Republicans with no moral principles and voters who don't know what they're doing or do and have just bad ideas. When you let them control your government, Ryan Walters is what happens. And he's going to keep getting away with this because the members of his own party don't have the courage to call him out on it. Not enough of them anyway. I know some of them are mad at him for not doing like everything they've already legislated and he's not spending the money, but that's it. They're not doing anything else. No one's really speaking out against him because he's a Christian nationalist and they know this is Oklahoma and Republicans are cowards. You've seen this with the Trump nominees. Like all these senators are like, well, if Trump wants us to nominate an alleged child predator for attorney general, who are we to say no? Like, they're all going to vote for these people. They don't have spines. Like, all of them, everyone with an R after their name is just as responsible for Walter's actions as the Republicans who sit in silence while he destroys the state. For what it's worth, the Freedom from Religion Foundation says they're aware of that prayer video. They're working to keep it out of Oklahoma schools. But it seems like superintendents are already one step ahead of them and saying, yeah, we're just not playing this. He can come after them. He probably will, but he can't force it upon everybody. Yeah, let's stop there. What questions do we have about that? I'm done talking about this dude for now. Oh, thanks, Olivia. Promoting religious liberty by taking it away. As you know, religious liberty is when you shove Christianity in everybody's faces. That is the Republican definition of religious freedom. It's the freedom for them to shove their religion in your face and no other religion counts. Dan says, I'm genuinely curious if Ryan Walters has taken a single STEM level class. I don't know his credentials, but it doesn't sound like he's an individual that's familiar with higher education. You know what's interesting? My understanding of Ryan Walters is he used to teach history of some sort. I forgot which specific classes, but there are articles online about where the hell did this guy come from. And they spoke to former students of his, and they were like, we like this guy. He was a great teacher. We genuinely liked him. It's kind of like what you heard from Tim Walls's former students. Like, they loved the guy. I think Walters was also a tennis coach, and his tennis students liked him too. And all of them are like, we don't know who this guy is who's pandering to Trump and doing all this Christian nationalist shit, because he wasn't like that when he was in the classroom. He was an awesome teacher. He clearly decided that being nice and being likable wasn't for him, and he just downed all the red pills he could find. So it's weird. Like, he is familiar with STEM classes or history classes or what have you. He knows how schools work, but maybe not AP classes. I don't know. But he's not trying to help his teachers. Now I don't know. He's like a guy who just has a vendetta against all his former colleagues. I don't know. Maybe they all hated him, even if the students liked him. I emailed our school staff and Oklahoma Attorney General about this immediately. My district superintendent called me personally to assure me that they would not participate. That is awesome. Thank you so much for doing that and making your voice heard. That is important. And if any school district in Oklahoma goes through with any of this stuff, or any of those AP Gov teachers uses the Bible that he sent them, this is one way you can fight back in your own way, which is show up at school board meetings and raise hell about why they're allowing this to happen. Because school districts that care about public education, and hopefully you have a superintendent who does, they should not be going along with any of this, because Ryan Walters is not interested in kids getting a good education. Spencer says, you want to know what love of country entails? Calling it out on its failures and working to fix them. Ryan seems to confuse we need to do better for we hate America. I mean, hey, that is the entire Republican Party. If you criticize America, if you say, hey, American history involves a serious look at the legacy of slavery, they say that's like revising history and we can't teach kids that because white kids might feel bad. I mean, the whole conversation around that stuff we've been having for a few years is exactly this. Some people say we need to do better. Republicans interpret that as we hate America, and then they use it as a weapon against liberals, which is idiotic. It's unfair. Not that it's not like it hurts them in elections, Republicans, but it's not right. If Idiot Walters is in charge of education for the U.S., could he do this nationally? My guess, he could try. He could try to do this stuff. There would be national lawsuits in federal courts. And then, I mean, I'm sure Ryan Walters, just like the Louisiana people who want to get the 10 Commandments in public schools, they want this stuff to go to the Supreme Court. And they're hopeful that the Supreme Court will just rule in their favor. So it's not that Ryan Walters could force all schools to do this stuff because everyone can just ignore him. But he can try to say, if you don't do it, we're not giving you special ed funding. We're not helping you with whatever things you need federal funding for. That's the scary part. And if anyone fights back against it, what's he going to do? You can go to the courts about it. That takes a long time to play out. He wants to throw turds in the punch bowl. That's his goal. Because again, he is not interested in making education better for anybody. He's interested in pushing Christianity through whatever vehicle he can find. And there are not any decent Republicans who are going to stand up to someone like that, not in this administration. So what happens to the head of the Department of Education when there is no Department of Education? Yeah, it's a good question. They all talk about eliminating I think Elon Musk said that this week, like he wants to get rid of most of the departments in the federal government. Does he know what any of them do? Of course he doesn't. And so, like, they all say they want to eliminate this stuff because they don't know what any of these departments actually do. I don't know what happens to the head of the Department of Education. Is he eliminating himself out of a job? What happens after that? I have no clue because it seems like still a long shot to think he could just get away with it. There's too much red tape you would have to go through to just eliminate the entire department, but they could make it dysfunctional, and that's what all the Trump nominees seem to want to do right now. Let's just make ourselves completely useless. So even if it's still on paper existing, everyone just thinks government sucks. And then what'll happen is after they ruin it, they're going to blame that on Democrats for some reason. And again, anyone who votes for Republicans is too stupid to know that's how this is working, that Republicans screw over everything, they break everything, then they blame Democrats for it. And they get away with it because their voters don't have the ability to know the difference. Thanks for that donation. David Packman thinks that whenever the left is able to wrest back control, we'll be able to rebuild whatever the right destroys. Did he say that? That seems surprising coming from him. I'm not so sure. A lot easier to destroy than build. Thoughts? I I understand that the left, the responsible side, is expected to clean up after Republicans' mess. That's been the history of US politics for decades now. Republicans break it, Democrats fix it, and then hand it over to a Republican administration that promptly takes credit for the good stuff and then breaks everything else. I don't know that everything just magically gets back to normal. Like, one, the idea that the left can wrest back control doesn't, that pathway seems so far off right now that I don't know how that happens. But also, their goal, and they've gotten better and better at this, Republicans have, is they destroy things and make it a lot harder to rebuild. So if they destroy public education and then dismantle the stuff, makes it hard to rebuild. If Robert F. Kennedy Jr. destroys the Office of Health and Human Services and the people who are working to produce vaccines in the event of a future pandemic, and then a pandemic happens years later, how do you magically fix that? You can't do it overnight. So if David said that, and again, that seems surprising to me, I don't think we can just count on everything working out. That's not how history works. Not everything bends towards justice. You have to actively work to make that happen, and it doesn't just magically occur. So this idea that everything will be all right in the end, that the good guys will always win, there is no version of the story where that just magically happens. We can fight for it, we can push for it, but obviously that's not what Republicans want, and they're going to spend years trying to destroy whatever they can because no one's holding them accountable for any of this stuff. I wish elected Democrats would hold them accountable, but you have too many people, even Joe Biden this week, having his meeting with Donald Trump where he's like being bipartisan and showing a proper handover of power. Like, no, dude, you know he's a dictator. Treat him like one. What the hell? Hakeem Jeffries said something like that too today. Like, we hope to accomplish something in a bipartisan way. Stop it. Why is one side the only side expected to be the adults and reach over and try to work with the others? No, you know what's funny to me? People kept asking Kamala Harris, what are you going to do like with your cabinet if you get elected? And she's like, I'm going to put a Republican in the cabinet. Literally nobody is asking Donald Trump or even thinking, hey, Donald Trump, are you thinking about putting a Democrat in your cabinet? Why would they ask him that? You know Republicans aren't going to do that. They're not going to do the kind, let's get different voices in the room. No one expects Republicans to function as adults. You expect them to be idiots. You expect them to break everything. No one is expecting them to reach across the aisle for anything. I swear that makes me so mad that everyone just assumes Democrats need to take the higher ground, that when they go low, we go high, all that bullshit. Like, no, start acting like them. Just, you know what? Just go out and say Trump ruined all the jobs. Just everyone start saying it right now and make him defend it. Make him fight against it. Like, how come they get to lie all the time and get away with it? It's so infuriating. I see someone saying, by the way, in the comments, then Trump's Democrat is RFK Jr. Like, I hear your point, but also, no, he's not. He ran as a Republican, as an independent. He has no political allegiance other than he endorsed Donald Trump. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing. She left a long time ago. There's a reason Democrats don't want them. He's not reaching out to any elected Democrat right now. It's ridiculous. And I also hate that a bunch of the centrist Democrats are the only ones that seem to be getting quoted in a lot of newspaper articles as well. What else we got? Thanks, Den. Okay, let's talk about something totally different because spend enough time thinking about Ryan Walters. Yeah, let's talk about Richard Dawkins. What the hell is Richard Dawkins up to these days? Okay, here's what you need to know about Elon Musk, okay? If there's anything you have learned about Elon Musk over the past few years, here's an example. It's that he's definitely not a tech genius. For years, people thought this guy's a genius. He's trying to go to Mars. He's building these electric cars. No, what we know about this dude is he's just a red-pilled billionaire who uses his unimaginable wealth to just make one dumb decision after another, at least if the goal is to make the world a better place. He is not interested in doing that. He overpaid for Twitter and for $44 billion. Then he ruined all the aspects of that platform that made it useful. Why? So he could cater to his base of right-wing trolls. He's horrible at running his own companies. Look at this headline about Tesla. He's responsible for taking money from shareholders and making the product useless. Liberals used to love Tesla. They don't want to buy his cars anymore. Here's another one. He has a company that's building these underground tunnels, and they're going nowhere. He gets cities to pay money to build his tunnels with the boring company. Haha. And then they don't finish, and he doesn't do anything with those. Ukraine. He offers internet. He says his Starlink company will help people access the internet. Well, in Ukraine, when they actually needed it, Elon Musk refused to provide Starlink support for Ukraine attack in Crimea. Raises questions. Why is our government having contracts with Elon Musk when he's using his wealth to hurt people, right? And obviously, the biggest thing recently is that Elon Musk, through his super PAC, through his America PAC, spent $200 million to help elect Trump, and probably more in the future to get Republicans elected as well. This guy, I heard someone else say this, $44 billion was way too much to pay for Twitter, but $44 billion is a very cheap price to buy our entire government. And that is what he apparently has done. And now that he's advising Trump on all these things, that means he has more opportunity to get his voice heard and hurt as many people as possible. You may have read this week that Trump just got elected, Trump appointed Elon Musk to run the new Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, get it? Like the Bitcoin thing. And it's him doing it alongside the conspiracy theorist Vivek Ramaswamy, which is funny because I'm not the first person to point this out. Why do you need two people to run the Department of Government Efficiency? That's weird. But basically, Elon Musk has become a really rich shit poster with a lot of good marketing abilities, right? He's a guy creepy enough to say to Taylor Swift that he would impregnate her. Where is that at? Yeah. He said he would impregnate Taylor Swift after she endorsed Kamala Harris for president and signed her post childless cat lady. Fine, Taylor, you win. I will give you a child and guard your cats with my life, which is a creepy, creepy thing to say by anybody, but also by that guy in particular. This is what he does with his time. Guys like him, by the way, are so obsessed with everyone else's fertility rates. They're so obsessed with how many babies everybody has. Taking care of his own children, he's not interested in that. But impregnating other people, he's so into that. Weird. I heard one critic put it this way. Musk is an apartheid, blood emerald skipping dipshit illegal alien who's never invented anything, but acquires businesses and hostile board takeovers, then gets sued for racial discrimination over and over and over. Well put. So I say all that because even this week, who was praising Elon Musk as like the greatest guy ever? It was Richard Dawkins. This is the tweet that Richard Dawkins issued. Utterly ridiculous. Look at this. Dawkins says, he condemns Donald Trump. Good. I take possibly forlorn hope in the fact that although Trump is a mendacious, malevolent, transparently evil man and stupid with it, all of which is true, Musk is not. He is highly intelligent and diametrically opposed to Trump. He has the welfare of the world at heart. No, what the hell? Look, highly intelligent. I will even give you that one if you want me to. But diametrically opposed to Trump? What world do you live in where the guy who endorsed Trump and campaigned with Trump and did jumping jacks like a moron with Trump, what part of that do you think makes him diametrically opposed to what Trump is doing? He has signed off on everything Trump is doing. Insane to say otherwise. And then he has the welfare of the world at heart. He has spent so many years just fucking over everybody. He wastes cities' money by getting them to invest in his Music Man type little debacles. Like, what? He's not getting to Mars? Even if you say, I like his rockets, okay, fine, but he's not the dude programming them. He just owns the company. If you like electric cars, that's great. But Donald Trump has said he's going to do things that make it harder to invest and get people to buy electric vehicles. So what's Elon doing for that? Nothing. He's instead going to break the government through his new position, try to downsize the federal government, making it harder for all those low-ranking but very important civil servants to do their jobs that make everything run properly. I heard this when Elon Musk bought Twitter, that he said he's going to fire like some percentage of the staff. And then he did. And everyone who likes him is like, see, everything's running just fine. He was right to fire everybody. And everyone who actually uses Twitter a lot, they could see how things were breaking down in real time, even if superficially it looked functional. It's like, someone else put this too. I'm stealing their words here. But like, I don't know exactly how the heart works or where all the arteries and veins, what their names are and where they go and what they do. But I'm also pretty sure I don't want you taking away like 40% of them. And yet that's what Elon Musk wants to do. And that's what Richard Dawkins is giving him credit for somehow. How could you think Elon Musk is a good guy at this point, that he's altruistic? None of that makes sense. And you know who agrees with me on that, especially with this idea that Elon is diametrically opposed to Trump? Elon freaking Musk, who responded to Richard Dawkins and basically said, what the hell are you talking about? I love Trump. Here's Elon's response. I very much disagree with your assessment of Trump. He has been the subject of extreme media propaganda. He won the hearts and minds of the American people for good reasons. No, he didn't. Egg prices were high and a bunch of idiots decided to vote against the incumbents because they think Joe Biden sits in the Oval Office with a dial that sets egg prices or something. Donald Trump didn't win hearts and minds. He won over trolls who hate all the same people. And then Republicans blame Democrats for global economic trends that Democrats did not cause. He did not win over hearts and minds. It's a stupid thing for Elon Musk to say. And Dawkins, hilarious to me. Dawkins is here trying to salvage Elon Musk's reputation. And Elon Musk chimes in like, no, what are you doing? I'm a horrible person now. Like, what are you talking about? I know, listen, it's not just the economy. Many Democrats didn't vote. A lot of them voted for a third party as a form of protest because of Gaza. But honestly, a lot of Americans just decided to blame incumbents for whatever was happening. They did not sit back and think, Donald Trump has won me over. Come on. It's not even the first time Dawkins has been doing this. Like, I went back through his history because, I got nothing to do. I went back through Richard Dawkins' Twitter history where he talks about Elon Musk, and he's been praising Musk for well over a decade. And here's the thing. I kind of understand why you might have praised Elon Musk years ago before he became this political conspiracy theorist. I don't get why you're doing it now, though. This is from 2012. He says to someone, no, Elon Musk is the new Steve Jobs plus Steve Wozniak. Okay, calm down, but all right, I get it. It was 2012, different times. I like this one, 2015. Times Person of the Year. I voted for Elon Musk. Brilliant engineer, altruistic entrepreneur, far-sighted visionary. And the only reason I like this one, because again, 2015, I get why you think Elon is smart. It's funny to me because Time doesn't let people vote on their person of the year. They just decide who is the person of the year. I think what happened is Richard Dawkins went on Time Magazine's website, saw one of those online polls that said, who do you think should be person of the year? Clicked on Elon Musk's name and thought he made a difference. He thought it was like a legit poll. Smartest dude, self-described rational thinker, knows how to spot bullshit when he sees it. And he's like, this online poll is how they decide who the person of the year is. Hilarious. And then, even more recently, this is from 2018. This one is just, you could tell Richard Dawkins is losing it here. Qatar Airways plane, whatever, Ted. Elon Musk, a visionary like Arthur C. Clarke. But Elon doesn't just write science fiction, he makes the future happen. A benign future. Oh my God, say that to us in 2024. A benign future. And he does the maths to make it work. Should be knighted, even though he's South African. Okay, letting that last comment slide. He does the maths to make it. My dude, he is not sitting there programming all this stuff. He can just buy them out and make other people do it. But again, this is what Dawkins has done for years. He praises Elon Musk as this second coming of Jesus or something and just acts like he's the greatest. And yet, even though for the past couple of years, Elon has been in our digital lives, ruining it in so many different ways, and now he's going to ruin the country because he's got nothing to do with his money. It's not like he's taking care of his kids. Richard Dawkins is still doing this shit. Like, what is he doing? He's supposed to be the rational thinker who can spot delusional thinking, and he remains one of Elon's biggest fans. It's just an embarrassment. And it's one thing if it was just Dawkins, but it's not. Because, get this, here's another aspect of this. You all know Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence Krauss, also another scientist who has written a lot about science. He also has a lot of crazy allegations against him if you ever get curious and want to Google stuff. But anyway, Lawrence Krauss wrote an article for a right-wing site where he basically blasted DEI initiatives in science places. Okay, I want to make sure I say this right. Let me share this tweet with you here. This is from Lawrence Krauss. He wrote an article for the National Post in Canada where he says, get the DEI out of science funding, Elon Musk. My newest piece. Grammar off, whatever, it's Twitter. But like he says, get the DEI out of science funding. And he wants Elon to do this. And I read this article. And this is sad and hilarious at the same time. Here's the thing. In the article, Lawrence Krauss says, he looked through the United States National Science Foundation's grants that were given out in 2023. And according to his article, 10% of those grants were for DEI initiatives instead of science. And how did he come to that conclusion? Well, he and his colleagues said they took that list of grants and they plugged it into ChatGPT. And they asked ChatGPT, hey, can you look at all of these grants and determine if they are scientific or DEI? And it never occurs to him that grants that might be offered to minorities or people that don't necessarily have the ability to get that kind of funding for the science they want to do, it doesn't occur to him that that sort of funding is science funding as well. They're not just giving out grants because someone's belonging like someone's a person of color. What the hell? But he plugged all the grants into ChatGPT and he said, tell me if it's science or DEI. And ChatGPT said 10% of this is DEI. And Lawrence Krauss never bothered to ask if like underprivileged groups getting grants might actually be doing good science, or if there could be scientific value in getting input from people who don't normally have a seat at the table. He just acts like minorities were getting federally funded grants because they're minorities. Utterly idiotic. He's very red-pilled as well. But again, I go back to this tweet. Lawrence Krauss is like, we need to get the DEI out of science funding, and he tags Elon Musk specifically. And then Lawrence Krauss issued a follow-up, very pleased that Elon Musk emailed me back to say, definitely happy to support his efforts in this regard. First of all, Elon Musk writes one-word responses to any troll on the internet. You're not special. Stop acting like he did you a favor. Second, happy to support his efforts in this regard. What do you think he's going to do to the National Science Foundation and all the funding they offer, which is actually really important? Because I promise you, if you think he's just going to stop funding for like DEI, you are stopping science funding. Lawrence Krauss, a scientist, is urging Elon Musk and the Trump administration to cut science funding because some of it might go to like black people and it pisses him off. Again, I do not understand why these guys get any respect from people, at least on our side of the world. It's also mind-boggling because here's an example of what Elon Musk has done over the past year. Elon Musk tweets false climate claims. Look at the subtitle there. The world's richest man has made public statements that deny basic science about the role of agriculture in heating the planet. Elon Musk spreads misinformation. He spreads misinformation about climate change. You know what book Lawrence Krauss just wrote? The Physics of Climate Change. He wrote a whole book trying to explain climate change, which is wonderful, by the way, like the idea that he's trying, I haven't read the book, trying to explain climate change to people. And now he's like, Elon Musk likes me? Oh my God. Elon Musk is spreading climate change denial. You would think Lawrence Krauss, of all people, would call him out on that and be critical of that. But here he is, like, desperately begging for attention from Elon Musk. By the way, if you get really bored, Google Lawrence Krauss and what he said about Jeffrey Epstein. Hilarious. Not related to this topic, but also hilarious. But also, when he was asked, hey, aren't you going to push back against Elon Musk on the climate change thing? Lawrence Krauss said, and I'm quoting here, I am hoping he was just trying to be polite. Like Trump said something anti-climate, Elon went along with it, and Lawrence Krauss is like, I'm just hoping he's trying to be polite. He wasn't. Elon Musk is an idiot. He doesn't respect climate change. He doesn't get climate change. He's a denier. Why are you on his side? Why are you so desperate for his approval? And we're not done yet. This is the what do you call them? The Matryoshka dolls of all of this combined. Look at this tweet from this week. Let me explain this to you just so you can stare at how juicy this is. Richard Dawkins tweeted an article written by Jerry Coyne, who is written about science, but is now all he writes about is trans people suck. And he also just repeats all the propaganda told by like right-wing propagandists like Barry Weiss. That's all Jerry Coyne does now. He's like, what? This right-wing person said something against DEI and I love them. And Scientific American is too woke now. That's all Jerry Coyne does. So Richard Dawkins tweets an article that Jerry Coyne wrote. The headline says it's about Sam Harris, who is a different can of worms. Sam Harris on the election. Trans activism completely destroyed something. The article is about how Sam Harris said trans activism is what hurt Democrats in the election. As if Kamala Harris spent all of her time on the campaign trail talking about trans people. And as someone who watched politics obsessively for the past however long, I promise you she spent zero time talking about trans people. You know who's obsessed with kids' genitals? It's every Republican in elected office. Donald Trump ran millions and millions of dollars of campaign ads attacking Democrats for like thinking trans people deserve respect. And Kamala Harris did, and all Democrats by and large, did very little to protect trans rights. Like they just didn't want to talk about it. But Sam Harris says, yep, that's the reason you lost, because you thought human rights should also extend to trans people. So Richard Dawkins posts an article by Jerry Coyne, who is endorsing Sam Harris, who is basically saying we should stop supporting trans people. It's just the worst mix of awful, awful people. What the hell? Oh, I got one last one for you. Then I'm done with this frustrating, horrible thing. Richard Dawkins Foundation is merged with the Center for Inquiry. I have talked about the Center for Inquiry recently because its CEO, Robin Blumner, wrote an article a couple months ago where she basically said racism is over and we don't need to worry about trying to fix racism because, you guys, Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court. We elected a black president, so stop worrying about racism. That was an article their CEO wrote a couple months ago. Well, guess what Robin Blumner's latest article is in Skeptical Inquirer, CFI's magazine. It's about, are we experimenting on kids? And she basically promotes this right-wing anti-trans thing out of the UK that has been debunked time and time again. I just want to show you the last sentence of this long, awful article. She says this about doctors who are helping trans kids. I hope their malpractice insurance is paid up. They're gonna need it. Screw you, trans kids. That's the skeptic group that, by the way, just hosted a conference in Vegas like a month ago where a lot of your favorite people attended and spoke at. That's her organization. Richard Dawkins is part of that. And all these people they're like all part of the same group chat where all they do all day is pass around like David Brooks articles and the Free Press articles, and they just say anyone who's woke is evil and the left is the worst. And of course, Trump is bad, but you know who's awesome? Everyone, all the people we like who supports Donald Trump. Like, all these people are so used to being treated as the smartest men in the room that they have now barricaded and siloed themselves away from anyone willing to tell them that they are actually anti-science bigots that they always warned us about. They have become the people they told us to watch out for. So I guess I'm not surprised if Dawkins is buddy-buddy with Coyne and Lawrence Krauss and all these people, Robin Blumner. It's no wonder that the same people who at one time were strong proponents of science are now propping up anti-science, anti-trans, pro-conspiracy bigots like Elon Musk and treating them as heroes rather than villains. Let's stop there. What questions we got here? Time to take away Grandpa's Twitter is something all these people said like 8 years ago, and it never happened, and he hasn't gotten any better. So right there with you, but no one's taking it away. He's free to say whatever stupid stuff he wants, but I think it is important that all of those new atheist science guys get called out on this stuff because they're just getting worse. What the fuck? Welfare of the world. Musk is a doomer trying to bail on Earth to Mars. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm right there with you. Elon Musk, to treat him as a guy who's caring about the future of the world while actively supporting Donald Trump, who absolutely wants to destroy everything and make life harder for the less fortunate. You don't get to say Elon Musk cares about the welfare of the world when he's doing that. You also don't get to say about it that to people who voted for Trump, by the way, or sat out the election for their pet reason, which was an idiotic strategic move too. Trump and Elon are prime examples of class solidarity. They're both only interested in pumping their egos and sucking more money out of people. Yeah, I mean, Elon doesn't need anyone else's money. He's doing it for the ego boost because he can't get respect anywhere else because he sucks at everything he does. Trump, yes, he definitely wants to get money out of people. And the one thing he's good at is taking advantage of gullible idiots. And so, like, match made in hell, I guess. Oh, what area in the government will Elon serve? No one really knows the Department of Government Efficiency. I have heard some people say it's like Donald Trump handed a controller, like a Player 2 controller to Elon Musk, but it's unplugged. So maybe he's saying, here, Elon and Vivek, like, go do stuff, but no one cares what they say because it's not an official thing. We don't know if they're going to get any sort of budget to do anything they want. At the same time, this is the Trump administration where the rules don't matter. So if Elon says, let's get rid of the Federal Reserve and just replace dollars with crypto stuff, like, I don't know, maybe that's what they're going to do because they don't have smart people in the room anymore. So who knows? I don't know. I voted for smart people. I was totally outnumbered. Did Kraus go dark web or whatever? Yeah. Yeah. He promotes a lot of crazy stuff. If you go down his Twitter feed, if you avoid all the here's where I am, here's what conferences I'm speaking at, because he says he was canceled, but then he just gets invited to go to all these places. It's just a lot of white dude right-wing grievance. It's all that stuff all the time. Like, this dude hates DEI everything. He doesn't like when scientific publications, I think Scientific American endorsed Kamala Harris, which of course they did because only one side, only one campaign was focused on good science, supporting science education, doing right by following the expertise. And he's like, how dare they play it unneutral by endorsing a candidate? Not in my world, you don't. Like, yeah, that's what Lawrence Krauss is these days. We haven't even gotten into Silverman. Silverman's gotten crazy. Hopefully that's a poor written headline, and it should have just read anti-trans activism. I'll be honest, Den, I don't even know which headline we're talking about anymore, but you're probably right. All right. Like and subscribe, please. I actually have some optimistic news. I know you cannot believe it, but give me 1 second and I will get there. I figured I should have at least one good story for you all. Okay. So 2024 election happened, didn't go great, but that's only at the top of the ticket and some places down ballot. But I did want to find some silver linings. So I wanted to basically share with you some of the good things I was able to see from the election based on some stuff I compiled. Here's one thing based on exit polls. And here's the thing you need to know about exit polls, which is that they're notoriously unreliable right now. We won't get good data on who voted what way, which groups voted which way for a few months. So these are exit polls. They're not necessarily reliable, but they're all we got right now. But look at this. When it comes to white evangelicals, 82% of them voted for Donald Trump. That's interesting. That's roughly what happened in 2016 and 2020. But I do want you to look at one thing. That represents 22% of voters. That top line right there. It represents 22% of voters. 4 years ago, they represented 28% of voters. So white evangelicals are very powerful. They're a very big block for the Republican Party, and they come out to vote for their dude because they do not actually care about anything Jesus taught. They just like the guy who panders to them and holds up a Bible, maybe upside down outside of a church after he uses gases to clean out protesters. So they're becoming a shrinking part of the population. That's interesting. Then look at this. This is how other people voted. Here we go. And I want to show you this. If you go all the way down here, nuns represent 24% of the population. These are the people who are atheists, agnostics, or who just don't identify with an organized religion, even if they believe in God. We are 24% of the population, and 71% of us voted for Kamala Harris. Why is that interesting? Well, it's because 4 years ago, only 65% of us voted for Joe Biden in 2020. So by representation, like a higher percentage of nuns voted for Democrats this time around than 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, we were 22% of voters. Now we're 24% of voters. So we are moving in the right direction. There's more of us. We are more aligned with the Democratic Party, not as much as white evangelicals with Republicans, but we're growing. I would love to see the breakdown for like atheists specifically. I have not seen those numbers yet, but I find that interesting. So that's one thing. So right now, religious conservatives seem to control every lever of the federal government. They're going to for years to come. It's very disturbing. We're going to have to play defense. But we, nuns, are becoming a growing part of the Democratic base. It would be nice then if Democrats started acting like it, with more targeted outreach to non-religious Americans. And I know that's hard because white evangelicals have a place you can go to, a leader you could speak to. We don't have that. Like, dear God, don't speak to Richard Dawkins to represent all of us, right? Based on the last story. But you could reach out to non-religious people without alienating everybody else by pushing back against Christian nationalism. We don't think someone's religion belongs in a public school. You could defend church-state separation at every level because religious freedom means religious freedom for everybody. They could start using that language a lot more instead of shying away from it, which is what most of them do now. So that's one thing. So with that in mind, here's a question. Were there any openly non-religious candidates, not nuns, not the people who are like, well, I believe in some higher power. No, forget them. Were there any explicitly non-religious candidates who ran for state level office, state Senate, state House, or for Congress? Were there any? How many, rhetorical question here, how many do you think there were who ran for office on the ballot this past November, this past week? How many of them were on the ballot and they were like atheist candidates for office? What do you think the number is? Maybe a dozen, couple dozen? I actually have that answer for you because along with the Center for Free Thought Equality, which is a political action committee affiliated with the Center for Free Thought Equality, which is part of the American Humanist Association, we actually kept tabs on this. And Den is going to share with you a link so you could see this for yourself. And we'll post this in the show notes underneath the video. Let me share with you this right here. This is the spreadsheet of everyone. These at the top here. The green means they won their election. Purple means they lost their election. At the top here, you have members of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. Then we have people who ran for Congress. Then you have people who ran for state House and state Senate. And every single one of these people are openly non-religious. And I just want to zoom in on the non-religious label here because this is fascinating. Look what labels these people use. Atheist and secular humanist, agnostic, humanist, spiritual, but not religious, agnostic atheist. There's some really interesting ones here. Non-practicing Catholic, whatever that means. No religion. Culturally Jewish, wink, wink, basically. Unitarian, Universalist, and a pagan atheist and humanist. These people are all openly non-religious. They all won their primaries earlier in the year, and they were all on the ballot. And I just want you to look for at the state level, state House, state Senate. Look at all the greens on this list, the green colors, because they won their races. And I know you see a lot of purple as well. But guess what? A lot of those people in purple are challengers. They're not the incumbents. They just said, I want to run because I don't want this seat to go unopposed. I'm going to put up a fight. It's normal that they lost. That's okay. That's not weird. There's so much green on here that it's really encouraging. And so you could scroll through that at your leisure, but let me show you some of the highlights that I think is interesting. The first is that all these people are openly non-religious. I did not see evidence of their opponents using that against them. With one exception, which I shared with you a couple weeks ago in Florida, there was a House candidate named Sarah Henry. Outside of that one case, I don't think atheism was used as an attack on any of those candidates, which I find fascinating because it absolutely would have been something they used against that person 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's interesting. What are the numbers? This is from the Center for Free Thought Equality. They gave me these numbers. Before 2016, there were 5 elected officials serving in state legislatures who were openly non-religious. 5. In 2016, it grew to 17. In 2018, it grew to 47. In 2020, it was 63. In 2022, it was 72. And as of today, that number is at least 77, with a couple races that have not been called yet. So there are more openly non-theistic, non-religious candidates serving in state house or state senate. There are more this coming season than we have ever seen in American history. That's incredible. To go from virtually no openly non-theistic public officials a decade ago or so, maybe 2 decades ago, to this many, that is mind-blowing. That's not just a shift in culture. It's a huge testament to all the groups that really work to make that happen. So that's amazing. What else do you need to know? Well, if you go to the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, that is the caucus in DC with about 24 people. Jared Huffman, the congressman from California, he's openly humanist. He's non-theistic. He's the co-chair with Jamie Raskin. They have a caucus that says we're working for church-state separation and we want to fight against religious discrimination against atheists, and we support reason-based legislation. Well, of all of those people in the Free Thought Caucus, which you think these are members of Congress, they're running big races, lots of money at stake, surely someone is going to use their membership in this caucus against them. Well, take a look. All of those members won with one exception, and it was Representative Susan Wild from Pennsylvania, and this is what happened in her race. This is in Pennsylvania where we saw that little bit of a red shift this year. She lost by about 1.5%. Now, she did not lose because she was part of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. She lost because it was always a swing district and it was a tough race. But that's it. Every other member of the CFC won their re-election bid. That's hopeful. Like, I hope more people join the CFC now that they know it's not going to be used against them. What about the people who ran for Congress? There were 7 atheists, non-theists, who ran for Congress. They were the Democrats on the ballot against these Republicans. Well, they went 0 for 7. But that doesn't mean it was a worthless cause, because if they didn't run, it's possible those Republicans would have just skated to victory unopposed. And that's not right. You want to give people someone to vote for. Also, by running and giving voters an opportunity to vote for someone instead of leaving that, option blank, they might have even galvanized more support at the top of the ticket and other members, other Democrats who were on the ballot. Like, sometimes we talk about coattails. People were so excited to vote for maybe Kamala Harris or Barack Obama that they actually ended up voting for Democrats up and down the line. Well, this is reverse coattails. Maybe even in a ruby red district, you put a Democrat on the ballot, give people someone to vote for, and while they're there, they might also vote for Kamala Harris or whoever other Democrats are on the ballot. So I appreciate that 7 people ran for Congress, hard races in very red districts, and the fact that they lost doesn't mean that was worthless. I like that. Maybe some of you are wondering, are there any Republicans on the list? There are actually 2 Republicans on the list. One of them is a Colorado state representative. His name is Ryan Armagost. And he actually said in an interview a while back that he's an agnostic, but he does believe in a higher power. Okay, whatever. Armagost ran for re-election. He actually won very comfortably against a Democrat in Colorado. So he is probably the only openly non-religious, or at least explicitly non-religious, Republican I can think of. There's actually one other guy, Brandon Finney of New Hampshire. This is a guy who used to be a Republican. Then he decided to leave the Republican Party and become a libertarian. Then he lost his re-election bid because no one votes for libertarians. And then he switched back to being a Republican because principles don't matter anymore, right? And in 2020, he won the election again. So, and by the way, that time, 2022, as a brand new Republican, he won by 15 votes, 1-5. So I went to check back on him. How's he doing during this election? here is that election result. He's actually losing his race. I believe that is 90 votes with everything in. I believe Amy Malone just got the check mark. So he lost this time around by 90 votes. That means there's only one openly non-religious Republican in state or federal office. All right. And I want to leave you with one last story here. I mentioned Sarah Henry. I made a video about Sarah Henry a week or two ago, so I won't rehash the whole thing. But I do want to tell you something about this. I mentioned Sarah is this Democrat from Florida who was running for a seat in the Florida State House. She previously worked for the American Humanist Association. And 2 years ago, she decided to be one of those people who said, I am not letting this Republican just run unopposed. I'm going to challenge him. And she ended up getting really close. She lost by a very, very small margin. And so she decided 2 years ago, I'm not giving up. I'm going to try again because I came close. I know more now. I have experience. I'm going to try to beat this guy again in 2 years. And Sarah's background is that she worked for the American Humanist Association. She was involved with some church-state separation groups, non-theistic groups. And this time around, unlike the first time, they very much tried to use her humanist affiliation against her. And again, I made a video about this, so I'm not going to rehash everything, but they said this Sarah Henry had spoken out against Christian nationalism. So Republicans are like, she hates Christianity. And Sarah spoke out against state-sponsored displays of religion, like a state-funded Christian cross on public property. And they were like, she hates Christian symbols. And she also said it's unfair for public school football coaches, something like that, to pray with their students on the team because that's coercive. And so they said, Sarah hates prayer, stuff like that. And they ran attack ads, commercials, mailers said that. And as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this, but here's how that race ended up going. Okay, this is the outcome of that race. Sarah lost. It was really close. I feel horrible for her, but look at that margin. In a really big election, she lost by under 1% of the vote. She actually did better this time around, not just in terms of raw votes, because it's an election year, so more people voted, but she got a higher percentage in a two-way race than she did 2 years ago. So despite all the attacks against her, she actually did better this time around, which is a testament to who she is and how these races go in general. And the story I want to tell you about this, it's I think, a quick one. In 2016, in Tennessee, something similar happened. There was a state Senate race in a very red part of Tennessee. And a woman named Gail Jordan, who directed a group called Recovering from Religion, decided she's not letting this Republican run unopposed. She wanted to jump into the race. Seems kind of futile, right? But she didn't think it was right for this guy to run unopposed. And guess what? She lost. Absolutely lost. She lost by about 50 percentage points. It was like 75 to 25 right there. Did that make her a bad candidate? Absolutely not. Because a Jesus-loving Democrat would not have fared much better. You know what I mean? But here's where it gets interesting. So she loses by 50 percentage points. Well, the Republican who beat her then got tapped to serve in the Trump administration. So that guy leaves. So there's a special election to fill that seat about 2 years later, maybe a year and a half later. So Gail decides to run again. And you would think you could run any Republican with a pulse and they will demolish any Democrat. And yet in that special election against a different Republican, it was a very different story. The Tennessee Republican Party waged a smear campaign against Gail. They drew attention to her non-religious beliefs. They called her a radical atheist. The lieutenant governor of Tennessee called her dangerous. They sent out flyers calling her kooky. She made some joke on Facebook. She had officiated a same-sex wedding, and she made a joke when she posted a picture online because it's really cute. She had this picture of her and the couple, and they took that out of context to suggest she was a traitor to America. And by the way, in that case, they used that picture with the same-sex couple in it And it actually triggered the PTSD of one of those guys who happened to serve in the military. That's what the Republicans did in a race that they were almost guaranteed to win against Gail Jordan. So they did all of that. And guess what happened in that special election? Well, Gail still lost because it was a ruby red seat, but this time she lost by 42 points. So she actually she improved on her performance from a year and a half prior to that, even though there were all these attacks against her for being an atheist. And that's what happened in Sarah's case as well this time around. And I know it's a hollow victory because none of that is a victory. But what that tells me is that if you're a good candidate, your non-theistic background is not going to hold you back anymore. There might be other forces in effect that make it really hard to win a race, but you're not going to win or lose because you're an atheist. You're winning or losing for other reasons. And I think for a long time, you could not get elected dog catcher if anyone knew you were an atheist. And what we are now seeing is there were like 150 candidates who were atheists on the ballot, and like 77 plus won their races, even though it was very public that they were openly non-religious. That is a good sign. I think that is important. Atheists deserve to have our views reflected in our nation's representatives, not just because we're a growing part of the country, but because we're good people in general. Not all of us. See Richard Dawkins. We think good policy stems from reason and science and facts and compassion, hopefully, and a desire to fix our problems, because there's no afterlife and no higher power that's going to fix everything for us. So you want those people in office, generally speaking. And that means if you're an atheist and you're thinking about running for school board or city council, you should do it. Don't shy away from it just because you're non-religious and you've spoken out about that, because it's easy to defend that. If you're anti everyone religious, okay, don't run. But if you're an atheist who thinks it's reasonable, there's nothing holding you back. It doesn't have to. So I hope the ones who got elected will use their new platforms to at least, push back against Christian nationalism and become loud, proud opponents of this attempt to Christianize our nation. Yeah, I'm going to stop there for now. Let's take some questions here. Oh, thank you for that donation. Thanks for what you do. I just subscribed to your newsletter. Thank you and thoroughly enjoy it. Also, a while back, one of your live streams inspired me to contact my representative. We'll be doing that again. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Hulana. What else we got here? All right, sign up there. I know I have more things I want to share with you. I'm going to try to be mindful of your time. Let me jump to this story right here. Okay. So the incoming Trump administration is on the verge of being handed a gift with the help of Democrats that Trump could then use to punish every nonprofit that works against its right-wing agenda. And that is frightening. So here's the backstory for what's happening. There is a bill. It was up for a vote this week. It's going to be up for a vote again. But it's basically called House Resolution 9495. And it's technically called the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act. Doesn't matter what it's called. But in that bill, there is a provision that would allow the Treasury Secretary to revoke the tax-exempt status of any nonprofit deemed to be supporting terrorism. If the Treasury Secretary thinks you're a nonprofit that's helping the bad guys, they can take away your tax exemption, which makes it hard for you to get donations, which makes it hard for you to function as a nonprofit. It's a death sentence for a nonprofit group. And the thing is, well, what does it mean to sponsor terrorism, right? Well, the phrase is very vaguely defined. I mean, it could theoretically be used to go against nonprofits that are supporting college students who are protesting against the genocide in Gaza. And that's kind of why this bill was passed. They wanted to punish those groups that are supporting that. But also, what about groups supporting reproductive freedom? If you're an abortion rights nonprofit, let's say you were Planned Parenthood, could it be argued in a right-wing administration that supporting abortion is kind of like the genocide of babies or whatever rhetoric they use? And then couldn't the Treasury Secretary say, well, we got to stop terrorism and you're a terrorist, so Planned Parenthood can't be a nonprofit anymore? That could theoretically happen. And then you get to church-state separation groups fighting against Christian nationalism. So that's the scary part. If this bill passes, one dude in the Trump administration, and I know he hasn't named a Treasury Secretary, but you know it's a dude, that person would have the ability to just decide which nonprofits get destroyed. This is an article from The Intercept that really talked about this. Under the bill, the Treasury Secretary would issue a notice to a group of intent to designate it as a terrorist supporting organization. And once notified, you have 90 days to appeal. After that, you lose your nonprofit 501c3 status. The law would not require officials to explain the reason for designating a group a terrorist group, nor does it require the Treasury Department to provide evidence. They could just do it on a whim. And as one person noted, it basically empowers the Treasury Secretary to target any group it wants, to call them a terror supporter, and block their ability to be a nonprofit. So that would essentially kill any nonprofit's ability to function. They couldn't get banks to service them. They won't be able to get donations. There would be a black mark on the organization, even if it cleared its name. That's the fear. That's why this thing is so scary. And this week, by the way, an earlier version of this bill was actually proposed months and months ago, and it didn't go anywhere. So what they did is they basically took down the old bill, substituted this new bill, and added one more provision to it that offers tax relief to American hostages being held abroad. And the thinking is, we know you don't like this part of the bill, but what if we put some candy on it that you can't really vote against? Then what are you going to do? And that's the scary thing to think about. So back in September, when this new legislation was proposed, over 100 nonprofit organizations wrote a letter to Congress, basically, to House leaders, and they urged them to rethink the bill. Look at this paragraph right here. This is talking about the old version of the bill when it was proposed. The potential for abuse under this bill is immense, as the executive branch would be handed a tool it could use to curb free speech, censor nonprofit media outlets, target political opponents, and punish disfavored groups across the political spectrum. And this is before Trump got elected. Moreover, the addition of this authority to the tax code would let the IRS explicitly target and harass domestic nonprofits using its investigative authority. It's also not hard to imagine a future administration using its power in far broader circumstances that have nothing to do with the hostilities in Gaza. Yeah. So like everyone knew what was going to happen. Let me show you one more thing. Who signed this letter? A whole bunch of groups. There's American Atheists right there and the ACLU under them. But all these groups signed off on this letter with version 1.0 of the bill, and that did disappear, and now version 2.0 has arrived. Okay? And one of the things they said in that letter is that even if these groups did not lose their tax exemptions, by targeting them, nonprofits would probably curtail their activities as a precaution to avoid stigmatizing or to avoid getting stigmatized and avoid any punishments. And by the way, in September, when they were considering this bill, it's not like this was unknown to members of Congress. Let me show you this. There was a Democratic member of Congress, Lloyd Doggett of Texas, who brought up all these concerns to a guy named Robert Harvey, who is a staffer with the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation. And Doggett asked specifically about all this. He said, I would just ask you, and I don't think this is a realistic possibility, let's suppose we had an administration that vowed to wreak vengeance on its opponents. I don't know, possibly. To prosecute lawyers, political operatives, illegal voters, and corrupt election officials to the fullest extent of the law, and impose long prison sentences on them. Someone who believes that those who don't clap for him are traitors. I know, we can't think of anybody like that. Look at the bottom here. Would there be any limitation on that president's Treasury Secretary on designating a terrorist supporting organization and strip that organization of its nonprofit status? Is there anything stopping them from doing that to any group they want? And what did the dude who works for the nonpartisan group say? Mr. Doggett, that requires me to do some speculation, but I am not aware of any limitations in the bill. So yeah, they could totally go after their political enemies. And so we've known this for months. And it wasn't until now that this bill came up for a vote. Like, and the thing that's scary about that is, you know how conservative Christians have lied for years about how Democrats were politicizing the IRS and using it to go after churches, and they were taking away their free speech rights because pastors just want to endorse candidates from the pulpit and they have a free speech right to do that. And all these Democrats were like, yeah, that's not how it works. You don't get to play politics as a nonprofit. And if you do, the Johnson Amendment that's been in there for 50 years in the IRS rules says no nonprofits can tell you how to vote. That applies to churches too. Well, the thing is, the IRS, first of all, has never done anything, even when they are told, hey, this church is endorsing candidates. They've never, as far as we know, revoked nonprofit statuses from any of these churches. Maybe once, maybe twice, but like nothing major. Certainly not in the past like decade. So that's the first thing. But also the idea that the government was going after churches, that was always a lie, right? Like, no, the Johnson Amendment applies to everybody, but the government hasn't gone after churches. The Biden administration has not targeted churches. I know churches love to say they're being persecuted. I know right-wing propaganda people love to say Christians are being persecuted, but no, never happened. And Donald Trump, by the way, said he got rid of the Johnson Amendment. That was a lie. He never did that, so it's still in effect. So anyway, if this bill gets signed into law, we are basically now handing Donald Trump a weapon he could use to shut down every nonprofit group in the country that he doesn't like. So this thing was up for a vote this week. And because Republicans wanted to fast track it, they had to have a supermajority in the House of Representatives. They needed 2/3 of the members to say yes to this bill before it could go to the Senate. And the good news is they did not get 2/3 of the vote. There was enough pushback when people found out about this bill. So many calls made to Congress, so much public backlash against this idea that a lot of Democrats they understood the assignment. They voted against it. 50 Democrats, give or take a couple, 50 Democrats voted for it, which is disturbing. And some good ones too. What the hell? I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but there were some names on that list who are far from like the bad centrist Democrats. There were some like left-wing ones on there too. I think Colin Allred, the guy who ran for Senate from Texas, he was on that list too. Like, what the hell? But anyway, the bill was defeated. But now this is what I just read. This is from today in the New Republic. Republicans are already trying to grant Trump dangerous powers, but look at the subtitle here. That bill, defeated once this week, is already back from the dead. They are going to put this to another vote very soon. And so I'm asking all of you, call your representatives, write them emails, tell them to oppose this bill. It is HR 9495, because the last thing Trump needs, especially with the help of Democrats, is a weapon he could use to shut down the free speech rights of nonprofits he doesn't like. And you would think all the free speech people would be up in arms about this. But again, these people have no principles. They don't care about hypocrisy. They don't care if you use the power and the levers of government to shut down their ideological opponents, because they have no other way to do it. Their ideas suck. Our ideas are good and they can't shut us down. So they got to use the government to do it. Like, that's the reason Republicans are not speaking out against this measure. They want this weapon ready to use as soon as Trump takes office. Okay. Nick Fish of American Atheists, I asked him since his group signed that first letter a couple months ago, what did he think about this version of the bill now? And this is what he told me. He said, any member of Congress who votes to give Donald Trump the unilateral, unchecked authority to exact retribution on disfavored groups cannot claim ignorance or surprise when he does exactly that. And he also pointed out, by the way, that if the IRS actually wanted to do something, there are 501c3 nonprofits, including that call themselves churches, that are absolutely not churches. Focus on the Family Research Council. These are large nonprofit groups that tell the IRS, we're totally a church, so you can't ask us for anything about our finances. Like, those groups need to have their charitable status examined and revoked. But the IRS isn't going to do a damn thing about that under the Trump administration. I mean, they didn't do it under the Biden administration either. They're definitely not going to do that in the Trump administration. So it's not like the IRS has nothing to do. But anyway, call your members and make sure they are voting against this bill, because otherwise I don't get what Democrats are doing. Why are they allowing the revenge tour to begin before he even takes office? All right, I'm going to stop there for that one. What questions do we have? When every act of protest is terrorism, there is no First Amendment. That's correct. I mean, you can't claim you're a supporter of free speech, freedom of speech, the Constitution, when you say, yeah, the government can go after you if they just declare you to be a terrorist, which applies to everybody we don't like. Doesn't the Southern Poverty Law Center designate terrorist groups? SPLC designates hate groups. And basically, those are groups that have irrational hate for certain groups of people. So they might spread lies about gay people that are harmful lies. Evangelical megachurches are usually not on the SPLC's list. But right-wing groups that spread lies about gay people, I don't even want to make anything up right now, but you can see that list. They will call those out. And they've been doing that for years. And that doesn't mean SPLC is always worth your support. They've done some shady things too. But in general, what I have found is when they say this group is a hate group, they don't just say that, they document it. You can read their justification for why they're using that designation. And that does have an effect. And that's why a lot of right-wing groups that get put on that list, they get very upset about it because they say it's painting them as a target. Sometimes groups like Charity Navigator that let you witness, that let you see their financial statements and stuff, it might say this is designated a hate group. I think at one point Amazon was doing a program where a cut of purchases could be given to a nonprofit charity of your choice, but they said no to anyone on the hate group list. So yes, SPLC does that, but one thing the SPLC cannot do is revoke their nonprofit status. They can say this is a group that is hateful for the following reasons. Not that we disagree with them. There are lots of groups they disagree with. Doesn't matter. These are groups that are spreading hatred unnecessarily, irrationally. And they justify it, and they have a right to do that. That is not like libel or anything like that. But that's they're allowed to do that, but the government has the power to fully destroy those groups. Has the Freedom from Religion Foundation spoken out about this? Yes, I believe they have. I'm pretty sure just about all the church-state separation groups have been on this all week, where they've spoken out against the bill, where they've encouraged their members to contact their representatives about this. Yes, I believe so. I have declared myself. Thank you for giving me a screenshot where I have to read that, which I'm not. Someone's going to clip this and make it very evil. Cool. Sign up at the newsletter. I got a couple more. I'll try to make them quick. I'm sorry. I know I'm running low on time, but I got 2 more for you. I'm going to whip through this one, I promise. Den, you're going to wave your hands like this at the 10-minute mark, I swear. Okay. Where is this? Here we go. I wanted to give you an actually good update from something I covered a while back. I had mentioned a while back that in Louisiana, the state legislature and the governor of Louisiana signed a bill that would put the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom in the state, right? And the legislature wanted this to happen. They're itching to get this in front of the Supreme Court. But this week, a U.S. federal judge said, nope, you can't do that. It's illegal. And that is a big deal. I just want to tell you what that judge said and how we even got here. In general, this is a bill. It's House Bill 71, and it was sponsored by a Republican state rep, Dodie Horton, who I'm going to show you the relevant part of her bill right here. It actually said you got to put the 10 Commandments. Let me scroll up here. It has to be displayed on a poster that is at least 11 by 14 inches, and it has to have the following, and it actually lists out what the 10 Commandments have to say on those posters. That is the KJV version of the 10 Commandments, and you got to put that up in the classroom. There are actually more than 10 items on that list. She doesn't know how to count. But that's what that bill said. And it was so blatantly illegal because it's an endorsement of Christianity that even though this bill sailed through the state house, the state Senate's like, you guys, we can't allow this to happen because it'll be knocked down by every judge in the country. So they made some modifications to the bill. The state Senate in Louisiana made some modifications to the bill. And basically, what they said, their version of the bill, said some other stuff. Like, you have to, here's their version of the bill. If you put up the 10 Commandments, which we're making you do, they have to have a disclaimer at the bottom. And you have to explain how this isn't about Christianity. This is about tradition and history. And you have to explain that history in the disclaimer. Oh, and also look at number 4. You can also, schools, you could, if you want to, display the Mayflower Compact and the Declaration of Independence and the Northwest Ordinance, whatever. So they basically said, you can't just put up the 10 Commandments. You can put a disclaimer on it. You're allowed to put it in context of other things. And the state Senate's like, that makes it legal, right? And then they passed the bill. And that's what the governor signed into law. It's clearly an attempt to inject Christianity into public schools. That's all this was, always. Again, just read the first commandment. I am the Lord thy God. There's nothing secular about that kids need to see. Like, how illegal was this bill? Well, a basically identical version of it was proposed in Oklahoma earlier this year. And even in Oklahoma, the Republicans are like, dude, we can't do this. This is too easy. Like, they're all going to get on us for this. So they didn't pass it in Oklahoma. Now, why is this bad for those 3 of you who are watching who are like, what's wrong with the 10 Commandments? Well, it's kind of bizarre that the same people who don't want high schoolers learning about sex or systemic racism or LGBTQ people, they have very specific things. They definitely want kindergartners to know about adultery and not screwing the neighbor's maidservants or something. Like, it's always a meaningless gesture. No potential school shooter has ever plotted out a path of destruction and then saw a sign that said, thou shalt not kill, and then decided, oh, God, I got it backwards, and then turned around and left. It's just a stupid idea. Like, it would be great if kids who needed help could see a mental health professional. But guess what? Louisiana lawmakers aren't interested in funding that either. They actually considered a bill to put Christian chaplains in schools instead of hiring actual experts. And then you get to the fact that many of the commandments are just flat out useless when it comes to instilling morality, because they talk about not believing in false gods and not making graven images and taking God's name in vain and not keeping the Sabbath day holy. None of that stuff matters in the schools. Like, what is the educational benefit of telling kids they can't have any other gods except the one true Christian God? Or that they can't make idols, or they got to sleep on Sundays, or you can't have sex with people you're not married to, 6-year-olds. I don't know. Do kindergartners really need to be told not to commit adultery? Because I'm telling you, if that was in a library book with a gay character, that shit would be out of there in a heartbeat, thanks to conservatives. But that's what this bill tried to do. And then the Senate said, we can't just promote Christianity. Let's try to put it in context. And they passed that bill. And when the governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, signed that bill into law, he said at the press conference, I can't wait to be sued. And then he was sued. This is from Americans United from June. Americans United for Separation of Church and State, a multi-faith group of 9 Louisiana families with children in public schools, filed suit in federal court today to block that law, requiring all public schools to display the 10 Commandments in every classroom. So these were not just parents filing the lawsuit. These were ministers. These were people with a vested interest in Louisiana who said, no, we're not doing this. So that lawsuit was making its way. Now, here's what you need to know about the bill. The bill said the law that Jeff Landry signed said all the classrooms have to have the 10 Commandments up, I believe, by January 1st. But the school year has now already started, so theoretically, they can start putting it up now, but they have to be up by January. Mind you, there are no penalties in the law if you don't have it up, but the law said you got to have it up by January. Well, the judge in this case got that lawsuit, and he very quickly said, okay, I'm putting a stop to this right now. No schools are allowed to put up any 10 Commandments posters at all until I issue a ruling. And he said, I'm going to issue a ruling by like November 15th. I think, yeah, that's today. So he said, I'm going to get back to you before November 15th. But in the meantime, no one gets to put up anything. Okay, so we were all waiting to hear what this judge had to say. In the meantime, what did Louisiana officials do? Well, Louisiana held a press conference a couple weeks in August, I think. And I did a video on this back at the time. Their Attorney General, Liz Murrill, spoke with Jeff Landry, and they said, all of you are freaking out about this 10 Commandments law, and we just want to show you examples of posters you could put up in your classroom that are totally secular and not at all controversial. And come on, when you see these posters, how can you possibly say we're trying to promote Christianity? And my favorite example of this was this poster that she literally shared. And it's fun, so I'm going over it. It quotes Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying, since the beginning of time, the world has known 4 great documents. Great because of all the benefits to humanity which came about as a result of their fine ideals and principles. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, said the 10 Commandments was one of those 4 great documents. And so, again, the Louisiana Attorney General's like, come on, it's RBG. She's one of your people. It's the 10 Commandments, but it's in context. Clearly, we're not promoting Christianity. Do you all hate RBG? Is that the problem? This was literally a picture that appeared in their response to the lawsuit. And the reason I bring up this poster as my favorite one is because when did RBG say that? Was it in one of her last Supreme Court rulings that she ever issued? Where did it come from? Because I'll tell you what, the Attorney General didn't say it in her press conference because I watched it. Guess where it comes from? It comes from a memoir that Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote near the end of her life. And this particular quotation is something she shared because she wrote it in 1946 when she was in 8th grade. That's in her book. That's when she wrote it. So Louisiana's Attorney General was sharing something written by a 13-year-old RBG saying, see, she likes the 10 Commandments. Like, that's how shady Louisiana was being about all of this, right? Anyway, so all of this, we're all just waiting for the judge to finally weigh in on this. And this week, the judge weighed in, and oh my God, it is a 177-page decision, and he left nothing unsaid. This is, the judge is District Judge John DeGravels, who is an Obama appointee. So, you know, it's like a judge with actual skill. And basically, I just want to read you part of this stuff. Among other things, he said that the Supreme Court ruled on whether the 10 Commandments by itself could go up 5 decades ago in a case called Stone versus Graham. And they said a virtually identical Kentucky law like this was unconstitutional. And he wrote, this district court remains bound to follow that precedent. And then ominously, he said, until the Supreme Court overrules it, which is scary because that's totally what Louisiana wants to have happen. But then he said, even if you don't look at that particular law, we can just look to what the Supreme Court has done in recent years. Remember the Bremerton case involving the football coach in Washington State who wanted to pray at midfield after football games? Well, the Supreme Court in that case said, you know what? It doesn't matter if a law is secular or whatever. What matters is tradition. Is there a tradition of prayer? And what this judge said, which is kind of interesting, look at this. The judge said there's no tradition of putting the 10 Commandments in classrooms. And he pointed out, I know Louisiana's officials said there was a tradition of this happening, but look at what the judge wrote here. In sum, The historical evidence showed that the instances of using the Ten Commandments in public schools were too scattered to amount to convincing evidence that it was common at the time of the founding or incorporation of the First Amendment, yada, yada, yada. That is, the evidence demonstrates that the practice does not fit within and is otherwise not consistent with the broader historical tradition during those time periods. To put that in English, what the judge is saying is, you gave me a list of schools that had the Ten Commandments up, but most of those were not public schools. They were private Christian schools. What the hell are you talking about? No one was ever putting up the Ten Commandments in schools. That's not a normal thing. So you're weird. Okay, that's great. That's a great way to dismiss an argument that is treated as gospel by a bunch of gullible white evangelicals who think David Barton is a dude who tells them the truth. Like, Christianity was never baked into our public school system, even during our nation's earlier years. And then, what else did he say? The judge also said, if you put this up, the Ten Commandments in classrooms, it is coercive. Look at this. Here we go. Each of the plaintiff's minor children will be forced in every practical sense through Louisiana's required attendance policy, because they got to show up to school, to be a captive audience and to participate in a religious exercise, reading and considering a specific version of the Ten Commandments in every classroom for the entire year, regardless of their age. Like, yeah, it's coercive. It is shoving Christianity in their faces. And what about the argument that the Attorney General's posters showed that you could put up these posters and it's not shoving Christianity in their faces? Look at this. This is what the judge wrote. He has no love for their stuff. Attorney General defendants treat this as a kill shot. They maintain they can comply with the Establishment Clause by surrounding the Ten Commandments with non-religious matter, no matter how outlandish that material may be. That is to say, they believe they can constantly change their iterations, leaving potential challengers like Menelaus trying to seize and hold the ever shape-shifting Proteus until Proteus eventually tires and divulges the hero's way off the island. That's a literary reference. Or put it another way, defendants would have aggrieved parents and kids play an endless game of whack-a-mole, constantly having to bring new lawsuits to invalidate any conceivable poster that happens to have the Decalogue on it. Glorious. I see you, Den, and I am wrapping up. So, in short, the law is very specific, the judge says. The Christian message is being elevated through this Ten Commandments law. You can't be fooled by the distractions. This is promoting Christianity. And basically, the court found that there's no secular way you could put this up. It's not legal, so he struck it down. The bill is dead. No one's going to have to put up the Ten Commandments at all right now. And so the only question is, what happens now? Here's what happens. Louisiana will almost certainly appeal this because they want another court to take a look at it. Because again, this is always about getting in front of the Supreme Court. So that's what we can expect. I hope other judges feel the same way, because this is a very thorough ruling from the district court judge, and it's very hard to argue against it. Doesn't mean conservative judges won't try, but in any case, the groups that filed the lawsuit, they are celebrating, as well they should, because that's a big deal. Okay, gonna stop there. I got one more story for you if you don't mind sticking around, but I'll take questions right now. Yes, good news. I know there's not a lot of it. We got to enjoy it while we can. Homeric references for the win. Absolutely. All right. One last story. Totally different, but I think you're going to like this, and it's your reward for sticking around as long as you have. Let me X out of a bunch of things here just to make everything a little smoother, and then we will talk about sex. Okay. Here we go. I read a research paper this week that was fascinating. It basically shines a light on the harm that purity culture has on women in evangelical circles. Because all of you know, I'm sure by now, in evangelical Christianity, very conservative Christianity, they really push hard on purity culture. And we've talked a lot about how purity culture is very bad for young women. Like, they get taught that sex is bad. Anything leading up to sex is very bad. You're destroying yourself. But this research paper actually looked at the consequences of purity culture on women after they get married. And that's what I found fascinating because I have not seen anyone go into depth about this. So, this paper looked at women who were raised in purity environments. They believed wholeheartedly that they had to remain pure for their husbands until they got married. And then they were supposed to willingly submit to those husbands after they got married, after the wedding. And yet, their sex lives rarely focused on their own pleasure, the women's pleasure, because why would it? And in many ways, purity culture actually forced them to downplay any abuse they suffered within the marriage. This is the big takeaway from the paper, and I want to talk about what's going on. And that requires me to explain to you just how damaging purity culture can be. Okay, and for the sake of this paper, they only talked about white American women because when you add race into this, it complicates the picture. So we're gonna try to keep it simple. But basically, I think if you don't know purity culture, you may be shocked at how abstinence is actually taught to so many millions of young Americans in their churches, sometimes at their public schools, a lot of times at their religious schools. Um, and this is what they tell a lot of girls. For example, what does purity culture say? Sometimes girls are told that their virginity is like gum, and that if you do anything sexual, well, that gum is being chewed up. And at that point, what do you have to offer your husband eventually? It's just going to be this chewed up gum that nobody wants. That's what they are taught. Another example, I've heard of this anecdote that let's say you're in a class of 30 kids, they give the first kid a cup and they say, spit in it. And then that cup is passed along to the next kid who has to spit in it. And they do that and they circle around the room. And the last kid in the room, they say, do you want to drink from this cup? Kid's like, ew, no. Why? And the answer is because if you have sex with other people, that's what it's like when your husband has sex with you. It's disgusting because other people have been with you. No one will want to drink that, is the implication. Another example they have used is like scotch tape or something, and they put it on your arm and they rip it off. And what happens when you take tape and you keep ripping it off your arm? At some point, that tape becomes useless. It's not sticky anymore. And that's what you're like if you do anything sexual. And one more is that you're like a rose, but everyone takes off one rose petal until all that's left is the thorns. And every time you do anything sexual, it's like ripping a petal off of your body until only the crap remains. So, this is the message that conservative Christians send to young women. And imagine the impact that has for, first of all, any kid who has any sort of sexual feelings whatsoever, which is a normal thing. What happens if kids, young women, have been physically assaulted? Where is that exception in the rules? It doesn't exist. So suppose you are the victim of sexual violence. Well, guess what? Your church just told you you are now worthless to your future husband. What happens if you're a young person and you just want to explore with someone you genuinely like? Well, your church is teaching you your future spouses are going to hate you for it. That's why that stuff is so damning. Here's another example. I'm going to show you a clip from a sermon. This is from a guy named Chris Valentine. And about a couple years ago, this is a guy who is a leader at Bethel Church in California. Google that one. It's crazy. But basically, in 2021, he re-uploaded one of his old sermons, and it caused a big kerfuffle because he says a lot of damning stuff in it. I'm going to play the clip for you, and then we will talk about this clip. But this is a guy who is promoting purity culture.
And girls, I'm just going to say this to you. Guys are stimulated sexually through the eyes, women through the touch. You're like, not me, whatever, you're a freak. So I'm saying, listen, if it's not for sale, girls, don't advertise. Okay? So, if you're doing this, I just want to say, you know what? If you fish with shark bait, you're going to catch sharks. And if you caught them because of your big boobs, or your big butt, remember there's always someone with a better body than yours. And if that's the kind of guy you caught, I don't know how you're going to keep him. There wasn't a dry eye in that place. And that young man said, why didn't anyone effing tell me this? The girl in the front row she was sitting on the bench, who was my most promiscuous girl there, who's letting everybody grab her on the basketball court and thought it was funny. She said, nobody ever told me this. They were talking about the fact that they had something that they were to fight for. And I want to tell you that I believe, and I've seen thousands, at this point, thousands. I wrote a book called Moral Revolutions. I've seen thousands of people's virginity restored. I have hundreds of emails about girls' hymens being restored. Hundreds. Yeah, it's not typically something you tell your pastor. By the way, I had a creative miracle. Really? Awesome. What happened? God restored my hymen.
Yeah, so that guy exists. Sexist tropes, victim blaming, bad science. He's like, all guys are stimulated through the eyes, women through the touch. Anyone who disagrees is a freak. That is not how it works. He told the crowd, if it's not for sale, girls don't advertise. But there's no analog for the guys. The guys can apparently wear whatever they want. He referred to a girl who attended one of his ministry programs as his most promiscuous girl, which is a weird description for a man to make about a child. And then he said, I've seen thousands of people's virginity restored. I have hundreds of emails about girls' hymens being restored. Oh my God, someone check this man's inbox. That's not what happens. That's not how it works. What the hell? But this is an example that they actually cited in the research paper as indicative of just how awful purity culture is. The paper actually included a couple other examples I had not seen before. One example, I was shocked to read this. This is from 1975. It's from Dr. James Dobson, one of the Focus on the Family founder, guy who wrote books that a lot of Christian parents used to raise their kids. He wrote a book in 75 called What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. And oh my God, I want to show this to you. He said that when men are not getting sex, their semen literally builds up inside them to the point where their bodies need a release. And I'm quoting here, if she loves him, she will seek to satisfy those needs as meaningfully and as regularly as possible. I swear this is the thing. Look at this. When sexual response is blocked, males experience an accumulating physiological pressure which demands release. I'm not reading all of this biology here, but a wife may find it difficult to comprehend this accumulating aspect of her husband's sexual appetite, since her needs are typically less urgent and pressing. Interesting bit of self-admission there, I feel. Thus, she should recognize that his desire is dictated by definite biochemical forces within his body, and if she loves him, she will seek to satisfy those needs as meaningfully and as regularly as possible. What about women's needs? I'm not denying that women have definite sexual needs which seek gratification. Rather, we could stop there. This guy, what does he say at the end? I'm merely explaining that abstinence is usually more difficult for men to tolerate. Yeah, women have no sexual needs, just the guy. And ladies, come on, you can't let it build up. You gotta let him release. Oh my God. By the way, that rule of the biology of the men, it builds up after days. That's not science. That's a myth. I don't know how else to say that to you. Here's another one that I learned from this paper that I had not seen before. This is from 2002. There was a guy named Kevin LeMan who wrote a book, I guess, called Sheet Music: Uncovering the Secrets of Sexual Intimacy in Marriage. And he basically told Christian wives they have to have sex with their husbands, even when you don't want to, because that's how love works. And this is from his book. This means there may be times when you have sex out of mercy, obligation or commitment and without any real desire. Yes, it may feel forced. It might feel planned. And you may fight to stop yourself from just shoving your partner away and saying enough already. But the root issue is this: you are acting out of love. You are honoring your commitment, and that's a wonderful thing to do. Holy crap. That's the if you don't both actually want to have sex, don't do it out of obligation. I promise you that's not going to end well. And what does that say about women in abusive relationships? That, like, whatever, too bad if you don't want to do it. You got to do it because that's how love works. What a horrible message to send to anybody, right? Just absolutely despicable advice. I posted before about a different example where there was a Christian wife who said sex with her husband was painful and unsatisfying for years into her marriage, and that she told her friend that it was like that. And she said, it's probably because I don't have a clitoris. And her friend is like, that is probably not right. And her friend then showed her where the clitoris was by using her newborn baby girl as an example. And that's very, very disturbing for all the reasons, not the least of which is because her husband is a clinical sexologist with a PhD, and apparently he couldn't help her with this. So then you get into purity balls, where daddies take their daughters to a dance, and the girls who are prepubescent basically pledge their vaginas to their dad for life until he can hand it off to her future husband. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, has attended a purity ball, and there's video of it. That's creepy. Or there's porn monitoring software so that, you know, your accountability partner knows exactly what you're looking at online. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, does that with his son, which is creepy. So that's purity culture for you. It's very disturbing. And again, all the things we have talked about apply to young Christian women. And over the past few years, what we've seen is a lot of those Christian women who were raised in that have spoken out against it. And they've said this is harmful, that it set them up for failure in their marriages. They are still Christian, but they feel it was harmful. And in fact, in 2018, the guy who wrote a book called I Kiss Dating Goodbye that promoted purity culture, Joshua Harris, he literally apologized for all the shit he had written. This is saying he apologized to the LGBTQ community because he was anti-gay, but he also apologized to women who were victims of purity culture because he pushed for that. By the way, he wrote that book when he was like 12 or something. What did he know? But this is the thing about purity culture. There's no nice way to spread those Christian beliefs without falling into these generalizations and sexist tropes and rejecting the idea that sex before marriage can be enjoyable. It can be educational. In a way, it could be empowering to you. And the proponents of purity culture cannot bring themselves to admit that other people have healthy, active sex lives outside of marriage, within a marriage, and that you don't have to be ashamed of it. For them, it's abstinence or death, pretty much. And that is how they frame it too. If you have sex, only bad things will happen. Like, there are no other options. And we know this leads to sexual repression, a deeply misogynistic culture, and a church environment in which assault victims can't even trust anyone at their church to tell what happened to them because they will be seen as the instigators. Because the pastor's first comments are always like, well, what were you wearing? So that's purity culture for you. So that's the backdrop of this new fascinating paper. And I'll show you the cover here if you want to Google it. Effects of purity culture tropes on white Christian women's marital and sexual satisfaction. And I don't want to spend forever on this, but the researchers basically explained what we already knew about the harm of purity culture, some of which I've just mentioned to you. And then they set the stage for what happens after marriage. Okay. And that's what has not been explored. And here's what they did. They looked at 6 common tropes of purity culture. First, they talked about gatekeeping. What is the consequence of teaching gatekeeping? Gatekeeping is the belief that guys all want one thing and girls have a responsibility to make sure those guys never stumble. So you better cover yourself up and not flirt. That's gatekeeping. Girls are the gatekeepers. Then there's perpetual lust, the idea that guys are always horny no matter what, and it's a battle for them. And you got to make sure they are not tempted. Then there's soul ties, S-O-U-L, soul ties. This idea that if you have sex with anyone before marriage, you are giving a part of your soul up to somebody else. And that means your future husband's not getting that piece of you. So those are all involving restricting sex, why you can't have sex. Those are 3 beliefs they asked people about. The other beliefs they asked people about were post-marriage, obligation sex, the belief that a wife has to give her husband sex whenever he wants it, her opinion doesn't matter. That's obligation sex. Second one is no divorce, this idea that you are stuck in your marriage even if you're not compatible and you realize your sex life sucks or there is abuse in the relationship. Like, there are some exceptions to that, but not a lot. So this idea that you have to stay in a marriage even if you're unhappy for sexual reasons. Last one is sexual methadone. And this is the idea that a wife has to give her husband sex frequently, or else it's your fault if he strays. So those all involve coercive sex, this idea that women have to give their husbands sex no matter what. And what the researchers found, and I am summarizing here because they do use a lot of jargon here, but what they found is that women who grew up with purity culture beliefs had higher levels of sexual pain. And what they said is, we found that past belief in purity culture tropes was associated with higher rates of primary sexual pain if you believed in soul ties, obligation sex, and sexual methadone. You had higher rates of sexual pain. All right. They went on to say that women who dealt with sexual pain were more likely to ditch those beliefs as a result of them. So I guess a silver lining in a way. What about marriage and sexual satisfaction? This is interesting too. They found that women who currently believe in gatekeeping, perpetual lust, and soul ties were less happier in their marriages and had less sexual satisfaction eventually. The people who believed in obligation sex in marriage were also likely to have lower current sexual satisfaction. No surprises there. Interestingly enough, the people who believed in they also said that people who believed you can't get divorced and that you have to give your husband sex whenever he wants, they actually had higher marital satisfaction, though it's possible that if you're in a community that believes that stuff, I think a lot of women have convinced themselves their marriages are wonderful. 1, because they have nothing to compare it to, and 2, they've never known anything else. But you know what the researchers said? Who had better marriages and better sex lives? The women who ditched all these beliefs entirely. And this is fascinating. I'm just going to read this to you. The people who never believed in any of this stuff had higher marital satisfaction for 4 of the 6 things they investigated. Women who no longer believe these things about purity culture had higher sexual satisfaction on average than the people who still believed. Those who never believed it in the past had higher sexual satisfaction than those who still believe it. And of the 6 things I mentioned, the most harmful trope was soul ties, the idea that women become used if they do anything before marriage. If they grow up believing that, the researcher said, their bodies may trigger trauma responses when they finally end up having sex, even with someone they love and who they don't believe is a threat. And finally, what the researchers said is, if you ditch these beliefs, it's actually good for your health. And I want to show you that right here. Give me 1 second. Yeah, here we go. Let me share this with you here. Boom. Look at this part starting here. Believing misogynistic religious tropes in high school was highly correlated to later developments of primary sexual pain. This suggests that the women who believed in this stuff at an early age and then experienced negative effects were more motivated to change their belief system than those who experienced no negative effects. So that's kind of good news. And the researchers went on to say that if we view sexual pain disorders as a form of complex trauma, what we should do to help these women out is to help them dismiss a lot of these beliefs. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, the more we learn about purity culture, the more we find out how much harm it's done. And whatever religious standards that the pastors and authors were hoping to meet by writing that BS years ago or giving sermons about it, all that we have heard since shows that it wasn't worth the cost to countless women whose lives have been ruined because they believed in that stuff. And if Christians don't have the guts to confront the mess they've created, it's up to the rest of us to call them out on it. Like that pressure from the outside, pointing out the weirdness of purity culture, that stuff has helped. And when Christians who lived through it call it out and explain how wrong it is, that stuff helps. And my God, think of the courage young Christian women have to call it out, even when they're in those communities. So kudos to anyone who maybe once wore a silver purity ring and thought sex would be amazing and perfect after their wedding, only to discover that sex, like everything else in a relationship, it requires work. It requires self-awareness and the understanding that not everybody is compatible. And so these researchers said they don't want Christian women to have to go down a path that is not right for them. The researcher, Joanna Sawatsky, she told me personally when I asked her about this, I think there's this misconception that the problem with purity culture is that people become prudish or don't like sex. What we have found is that for many women, their ability to consent has been systematically chipped away. It's not that they're prudes, it's that they're not able to say no, and so they cannot freely say yes. So to put it another way, if you don't think of your current or future husband as a horny monster who must constantly be fed, and if you don't think of sex as something that must always be suppressed until marriage, at which point it'll immediately be unleashed, you're probably going to have a happier marriage and a healthier sex life. And if you have a happy marriage and a healthier sex life, you're more likely to ditch those purity beliefs that were there in the first place. And so what the researcher told me is that it's long past time for Christian leaders to stop treating sex, and I love the way she said this, they need to stop treating sex as a male need and a female obligation. Focus on consent, ditch the sexist language and the bad biology, stop comparing girls to chewed up gum. Fascinating paper, fascinating topic. Maybe eventually these purity advocates will put away their Bibles and read about the real life impacts their sermons and books have had, and maybe they will change course. But until then, it's up to everyone else to try to educate people. Okay, I know that's a lot. I'll take some questions, but I think that's it. Thanks for sticking around today. Even in non-abusive relationships, victims of purity culture go directly from complete innocence to fully sexual creatures on their wedding night. It's 0 to 60, and it messes folks up. No kidding. I have read so many horror stories about people. I mean, just think about that. There are some people, some Christians, who brag about this online. They went from having their first kiss on the altar in front of everybody on their wedding day to thinking sex was going to be perfect like an hour and a half later, which anyone who's had sex will tell you is not how it works. And that will mess with you when you realize, why isn't this perfect? Why am I not enjoying this? And what happens if you stick in a marriage and the guy wants something, she doesn't, it gets abusive, or vice versa. If it gets abusive, now you feel like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is supposed to be good. This is what I was told was good. It's very disturbing. These people will do anything except hold men accountable for their own actions. Can you just imagine if that dude whose clip I played for you earlier was caught up in some sexual, scandal? It hasn't happened. I'm just saying. It happens a lot. I don't know to that guy, but I'm just saying. If any of these people cared about sexual scandals, maybe something would happen. But as we know from the election, 82% of white evangelicals refused to hold Donald Trump to any accountability for sexual stuff. And that guy was held liable for rape. They don't care. They're not holding their own people accountable. Ever. Telling women they should have sex with their husbands, even if they don't want to, instead of telling husbands to change so their wives want to have sex with them, is certainly a choice. Yes, it is. And again, if it's obligatory sex all the time with your partner, there's something wrong with the relationship. And that is something you don't hear them do sermons about. That if things aren't working and you don't want to do it, then you should get counseling. You should talk to each other. You should figure out what's happening. And in that case, it is possible that this is not working. This relationship is not worth salvaging. And that's not an option they will ever consider on the table. While women bear the brunt of the damage, purity culture messes up young men too. It's just bad for everyone. Oh my God, absolutely. And I know I didn't talk about that, but thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, a lot of the damage is done to young women, but telling men that, oh, if something happens to you, it's the women's fault. If you do something, it's probably because they were flirting with you and it's not your fault. Like, men are taught in those communities, you have no control over your choices. It's natural. It's how God wants you to be. That's messed up too in a very different way. And by the way, it suggests that after you get married, you're supposed to be good at sex when you don't have any experience either. It also, by the way, the double standard is there too. If girls do anything leading up to sex before their wedding day, they're considered whatever slur you want to use. Whereas if a guy does something, whatever, it happens. Don't worry about it. We'll fix up your hymen, or whatever the male version of that is. Have you ever heard of the dog poop and brownies analogy? Off the top of my head, no. I am worried about where you're going with that. Maybe you could send it to me. And now I feel like that's not a thing I also want to Google. I don't know, Spencer. Share it in the comments. And if we have any time afterwards, we can get to it. All right. I think we're done for now. You can all Google that one for yourselves. Thank you so much. I know this was long. Thank you, Den. I'm sorry I kept you forever. I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. You could subscribe to friendlyatheist.com. Go to patreon.com/Hemant to support what I do. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful week.